I'm the prescribed fire coordinator here at ODF, and we'll be kicking off our spring certified burn manager advisory committee meeting here shortly. We're just still admitting folks who are joining the meeting. So thanks for your patience. We'll get started here in just a moment. Okay, I think we've got everyone we're expecting from what I can tell here. So we're going to go ahead and get started. For those of you who are on the committee proper, I sent you an updated agenda, and I'm going to share that real quick from my screen so that everybody sees the change. It's pretty minor. And let's see here. So here's the agenda so everybody knows what to expect in our meeting today. I'm going to run through it really quick and then we'll go ahead and get started with our meeting. The first thing we're going to do is a welcome and introductions. I've sort of already welcomed you all, but we'll do introductions for the committee members only. And in particular, we want to welcome two new members, Jesse Jackson from the Cow Creek Band of the Umpqua Tribe of Indians and Tim Sexton from the Klamath Tribe. They'll have a chance to tell you a little bit more about themselves in a moment. After that, we're going to go into the charter review and election of chair positions, and I increased the amount of time with that just a little bit because I had another line item there that I went and put down into the updates, which was the CBM website and the directory update to that website. So I realized that time could probably be better used looking at the charter a little more closely and then spending some time on our chair election. I didn't change the time frame for public comments, and I see we have a number of folks here who are from the public, so that's great. You'll have a chance to comment at 1:35. And then we'll go into just kind of a breakdown of where the trainings have been delivered thus far and just talk a little bit about how the trainings are going and receive any feedback on that. We'll take a break at 2:15. And then at 2:30, I'm just going to kind of give you guys a little bit of a tour over the years since the program has started in terms of what our CBMs and trainees look like by the numbers. And then at 3 o'clock, we'll talk a little bit about how CBM is being used for cultural burning, how that's talked about, what it looks like. And then we'll have 20 minutes for rule revision suggestions if you have them, because we are going to be taking a look at the rules starting this fall. And then when we're done with that, I'll just go through some updates. I'll include the directory and looking at that on our website, and I'll tell you a bit about how that came about. I'll talk a bit about the national forum that Kyle Lapham and I started. He's from Washington, DNR. And we'll talk about how that's transpired in the last year. Do a quick update on the liability pilot program, and then I'll chat a little bit about the development and the approval of ODF's prescribed fire manual. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen and then go ahead and invite members of the committee to introduce themselves. And I'm just going to call on you as I see you on my screen. So Amanda Sullivan-Astor, you can go ahead and go first.
All right. Well, hey guys, Amanda Sullivan-Astor. I'm the Forest Policy Manager for Associated Oregon Loggers. For those that don't know who AOL is, we represent the forest contractor space, so small businesses that work in the woods, and that includes folks that are doing burning.
Great, thanks. Next up, Aaron Krikova.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Aaron Krikova, the organizer of the Rogue Valley Prescribed Burn Association.
And I've got Kai Sauerbrei.
Yeah, good afternoon, all. Kai Sauerbrei here. I'm the fire program director for the Nature Conservancy here in Oregon, a Type 2 burn boss, and a CBM.
Great. Next up, Mark Shea.
Good afternoon, Mark Shea, Deputy Chief of Fire and Life Safety for Ashland Fire and Rescue, overseeing our wildfire prevention mitigation programs, including management of the municipal forest.
Great. Thanks. Mike Betchtold.
Yeah, Mike Bechtel. I'm a president of the Klamath Forest Health Association and retired BLM and retired bird boss.
Great. Thanks, Mike. Bechtold. I'll pronounce that correctly next time. Thanks. Jesse Jackson.
Habib, how to do. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jesse Jackson. I'm the Education Programs Officer for the Cow Creek Band of Umpqua Tribe of Indians. I'm also the eldest grandson of former Chief Chuck Jackson. I'm also a CBM trainee and happy to be here today.
Great. Jesse's one of our new members, and then Tim Sexton is also one of our new members. Go ahead, Tim.
Good afternoon, Tim Sexton. I am the Wildland Fire Program Manager for the Klamath Tribes.
Fantastic. All right. Thanks, everybody, for providing your introductions. For folks that are not aware, this committee is made up of 7 members, and we really try to find folks that are broadly representative of the interests in prescribed burning in Oregon and the Certified Burn Manager program. Most of the folks on the committee are certified burn managers. That is one of the preferential criteria for being on the committee. We do end up having 1 or 2 positions open up each year and a process of application open for that. So we didn't have as many applicants this year as we typically do. We usually have way more than we anticipate, and we had a few less this year than we normally do. But really excited to have Tim and Jesse on the committee. They are representing some of the tribal space in Oregon. We don't have an official tribal seat, and the reason for that is because if we offered one, we would have to offer 9, one for each of the federally recognized tribes in Oregon. But it's great to have some representation from that space, in particular with the interest in using the CBM program for cultural burning, or for prescribed burning with cultural objectives, as it's sometimes referred to. So really appreciative of everyone who's been able to come on the call today, and for those new members in particular for joining. We really appreciate it. Kind of as a little bit of a high level, maybe thoughts from myself, now that we have the program really launched and we have a lot of movement with it, I see that we have, I think, more need for this committee to meet more often and perhaps to form subcommittees. So as we move through our meeting today and folks have thoughts about how things have been going, or thoughts on how we could improve our program, perhaps with the formations of subcommittees, we encourage folks to go ahead and make those kinds of recommendations, because we really are interested in seeing how we can grow this program out with input from our advisory committee. Amanda, yes.
I just had a question. Can you just clarify who rolled off the committee?
Yes, we lost Kenny Rose and Colby Drake. And so Colby is the Natural Resource Director for the Grand Ronde Tribe. Kenny Rose from Justina Resources. And to that end, Amanda, we're very grateful that you're still here, because we need industry representation. And Kenny was, he was really part of representing that aspect, but we didn't have anyone apply with anywhere near the comparable level of representation and experience from that end. So maybe you can help us do outreach the next round to see who from that side of things might be interested in joining. Thanks for asking that question. That's important. To that end, if you've been looking at the website, it will be updated. But I thought we should probably start with our charter, because when we do a website update, it's easier if I can ask the person who does that for us to do it all at once instead of piecemealed. So don't worry, for those of you who are new on the committee, your names will be added to that list. And then we'll also add the updated charter to it, which right on time. Let's talk about the charter. I'm just going to share my screen and walk through it and talk with you guys about it as we go. And if someone needs to speak or wants to interject, just come off mute and interrupt me if you want, because I'm not going to be able to see hands raised and stuff as I do that. Or maybe someone else can put something in the chat, because I should be able to still see that. So let me pull up the charter and we can walk through that together. And for those of you who are here from the public, if you have thoughts, just remember, if you have thoughts on this, we have a public comment period timeframe. So if you could just save your comments till that point, opening the floor up is for the advisory committee members, and then those who are here from the public can comment during that specific timeframe just to keep it kind of clean. All right, let's try this here. All right, so here's the charter. Can everybody see that okay? Should be able to. Okay, I'm going to expand. Or wait, hold on. You guys can see it. Okay, I'm going to pull it up again. Here we go. All right. So we approved this in July of 2023. So we're coming up on 3 years since this document was originally created. And I think there's a few things that could be changed in it. The beginning of it, I don't think really needs to be changed. It's just the background and history of why we're doing this, what rules govern our establishment of this committee. It was established under Senate Bill 762, which was passed in 2021, and it revised ORS 477 and 526 to establish the Certified Burn Manager program by rule. And so that included the formation of a committee, and you can read about that in the rules as well. And I'd encourage you to do so, particularly if you see things in the rules you think should be changed. So one thing to note is that this group does not make decisions, but it does advise and it makes recommendations. And I think that will probably remain, right? But how much advising and recommendation making should this group be making? Could there be more than what we already have? I think there could be. So part of the meeting intent for me today, at least, is to solicit some more feedback about what kind of recommendations and advising this group could help with. I heard someone. You got an idea? Okay, someone just came off mute. I'll keep going. So, again, there's guiding principles and policies, and those are outlined in 47705. And the relevant section that applies to the Certified Burn Manager program and this committee is under statute is 526-360. So that's what directs us to create the rules associated with this program. I did work ahead here too, so we didn't spend our time here today updating this this list here. So one thing to note is that John Punches right now is kind of double dutying for the Prescribed Fire Council and OSU. Now, if we get into a situation where there's a vote, that could get complicated if those two organizations ended up not aligning in their recommendations for how he voted. I would be surprised at that, but that is something to note. So this is an interim fix for now. And the Prescribed Fire Council has been revamping itself with a new board and new bylaws. And so I kind of held off on soliciting them for somebody new when Colby Drake left. That was also in part an interest in ensuring that we had representation from tribal communities. So otherwise, we have, again, added and removed folks. So that remains. Of note is that our federal ex officio members have been mostly absent from our meetings, with the exception of BIA. Vernon Stearns came to our last meeting. I'm not sure if he's here today, but we had sent letters to the Forest Service and the BLM requesting representation, and we did not hear back from them. And now with the reorganization of the BLM and BIA and other DOI agencies under the Wildland Fire Service, I think we'll be revisiting that prior to our next meeting, which we will be having this fall, by the way. So that's the layout of the membership. And these are public meetings, so of course, non-committee members are allowed to participate. There are processes for having an alternate fill in for you and such, and so far we haven't had any issues with that. But under section 6, this is where we need to do some work today. So we need to elect a chair. And I realize that's sort of a tricky situation because you might not be sure if somebody else wants to be a chair if you're electing them. But I would welcome anybody who's willing to volunteer for that position, and we can talk a little bit more about that. But I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing for the sake of having a quick conversation to that end. Let me be clear about what the chair position involves. Primarily, you would be working with me as the prescribed fire coordinator to create the agenda for the meeting. You don't have to run the meeting. You don't have to do anything extra other than being available to review and concur with the establishment of an agenda or to work with me on creating it. Me as well as a couple other folks from ODF. So I don't know who's interested or if there's anyone who wants to nominate someone else, anyone wants to nominate themselves. I'm going to open it up for that, and I'm going to be quiet for a minute while folks think on it for just a second. And I don't know if I mentioned this, but for reference, it was Colby Drake was our chair previously. And I can understand if you're a new member thinking that maybe you shouldn't step up for that, but anyone can volunteer. Again, it's not a significant lift or workload for that individual. They're just really helping us establish our agenda. Okay, I'm gonna ask John Punches how he feels about the idea of working with me on chair. Oh, Jesse Jackson said he'll do it if no one else will. I welcome that too. What do you think, John? Would you be, do you want to give it a shot, or shall we take Jesse up on his offer?
Take Jesse up on his offer, and I'm always
Excellent.
there to help in the background.
Cool. That's great. One thing that I think would be, this is just an example of a change to the charter I would like to see, is that if we do a chair and a vice chair, then we always have a preloaded person to move into the chair position. And again, it's really just a backup person. And I think the reason we don't have a vice chair is because the responsibilities are minimal enough that it's not really a substantial lift. But Jesse just sent me a message privately, so I'm going to take him up on his offer, and I think that will work out well for the group. And then John, would you be interested, John, in taking on that vice position so that we had a backup for him?
Sure. We'd have to be informal at this point because it's not in our stuff at this point, but I'll help
Yeah,
out whoever you need.
right. So if we made that change, which the group would have to vote on, and we have a process for voting. So okay, well, we're going to say we have established our chair, and John is an unofficial, off the record backup for Jesse. And if we get our rules changed to support that, we can codify it. Amanda.
Um, I'm gonna say off camera because I'm eating, but do we need to vote then? Does
Yes.
somebody have to motion that?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I am happy to make the motion to elect Jesse as our new chair.
Does someone want to second that?
Mike Bechtold seconds it.
All right. I'm going to get back into the rules really quick so I make sure we follow them as far as how we make decisions. Okay.
Since we're consensus, I think
Yes.
we can just, if we all agree that we have consensus. So I think we would just ask if there's anyone who isn't in consensus or something of that
Yeah.
nature.
The question is, does anyone object to Jesse becoming the chair? Okay, no objections. Does anyone object to, well, I guess we're not going to formally vote for you, John. What we really need to look at is go back to the charter. So I'm going to pull that back up again because this is where we need to talk about whether or not, before we even pull the charter up, let's have a discussion about that. what does it look like to make a change in the charter that establishes a vice chair so that we have someone as a backup and someone to come in behind that person the following year?
I support the idea. It makes good sense so that you don't have to have a hard and fast decision every year, and someone to back them up in case they want to fall out for whatever reason.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And the
I
other,
believe,
go ahead.
I believe Amanda, there's a backup for a committee member as well. So I don't know if we could just amend that to include not only committee members, but the chair.
Yeah, so then that would be, in that case, would that be not somebody who we voted in, but who that they could decide who that fill-in would be for them? Is that what you're saying?
Well, my understanding of the charter, as I read it about an hour ago, is that a committee member can name a proxy if they can attend the meeting. So
Yeah, that's correct.
similar to that.
Okay. How do folks feel about that?
I think it's wise to have the capacity for proxies just so we have continuity of the number, excuse me, number of people attending.
I would just say that a vice chair seems different than a proxy.
Yeah, I think we're talking two different things. So there's one part of our charter that we're modifying to say we're going to have a chair and a vice chair, and a separate part of our charter that I think we're acknowledging that there's a capacity for proxies for people showing up, but they're not the same things. So I can't send my proxy to be the vice chair if I'm the vice chair.
Would your proxy still be able to vote?
Your proxy can vote for you, yes, if they're coming in as your replacement. I think I agree that these are two different things. And one of the concerns I would have is the continuity factor as well. Amanda?
Yeah, I think we need to take a few things um like separately here because a, I would argue that a proxy is different than what our charter says about an alternate. An alternate is a designated alternate for that specific individual, and they are the only person that can act on behalf of the individual who's identified in the charter. So our charter right now does not actually speak to proxies. It just identifies a alternate. And if you don't have an alternate identified in the charter, then I would argue that you don't have somebody that can take your place. So if we want to change that, we should change that if that's something that people want for voting purposes and um for quorum for business being made. But as it relates to the vice chair position, I would rather have duties identified in the charter. That way people know what they're getting into, um, versus kind of something that's a little bit more laissez-faire.
Yep. I hear what you're saying. And I think that makes sense because you would just specifically say if you're in the vice chair position, your job is to fill in for the chair if they're unavailable and become the chair when their term is up. That would be my thought. That's as an example.
It
Kai, did you
seems
have a
like
thought?
a simple addition to the chair and subcommittees, section 6, where you just say chair, vice chair, and subcommittees. And then, as Amanda's saying, outline the responsibilities of the chair, outline the responsibilities of the vice chair, and then include some language on how that person is elected, like we just did for both the chair and the vice chair, and then the rotation of terms. Then the only other thing I could see getting a little complicated that might need additional language is because we all have different term lengths, ensuring that when you're electing a vice chair, that that individual has a long enough term remaining to serve in that role.
Yeah, we're thinking along the same lines. I was considering that as well. Tim, did you have a thought on this to share?
I was just agreeing. It just makes sense to have a vice chair that's in the chute to become the chair and um, be able to take over a meeting if the chair is not available. So I agree with both what Kai said and you, Amanda.
Yeah, I think thinking through that in terms of that person's availability, but also knowing that if they either leave the committee or their term is up, we just refill that position, just like we have with the chair. So I think that can be dealt with on the fly, although we probably wouldn't select a chair who's in their last year and doesn't have any time left on the committee. So this is great discussion. It's very much appreciated. What I would propose is that I take the ideas that you guys have thrown out here, and I go ahead and edit the charter, and then I bring it back to the group in the fall for approval. Does that make sense to everyone here, rather than trying to do wordsmithing and that sort of thing in the next 9 minutes? Okay, great. Good discussion. I'm going to pull the charter back up again so we can just walk through what's left of it, and then folks can have the chance to comment otherwise. All right, going back up to where we were. Let's see. Okay, so there's the chair and subcommittee. So we would be adding into that. And this is kind of my version to comment on. So I will make change to, and then all right. Let's see. So the materials are being provided electronically as a sustainability measure, as everybody knows here. So we always post everything to the web page and announce the meeting before. And then this is another thing I thought we should change, that we had said we were going to meet hybrid. And what I found is that when hosting a public meeting in headquarters and sitting in the Tillamook room with me and maybe 2 or 3 other people, it can be kind of awkward. And so even though I started off scheduling this as a hybrid meeting, I ended up switching it to virtual because the Smoke Management Advisory Committee has been taking a different approach that I thought we might consider, which is to have one fully virtual meeting and then one in-person meeting a year. And so that's one idea, that we have one in-person, one hybrid, or I mean, sorry, one person, one virtual. We could just make them always virtual. We can stick with hybrid, but I wanted to throw out those 3 ideas to this group to talk about, so that we can follow our rules and also, not necessarily do things in ways that don't make sense. So do people have thoughts on that? I'm going to stop sharing and look at the crowd again.
So when would the fall or post-summer meeting be?
We're going to, I think we're going to shoot for end of October, beginning of November. The goal is to get kind of shoot the gap between broadcast and pile burning in the fall.
The
Usually
way weather is, it's hard to make sure you shoot that gap, but
oh, I know. I know stuff's happening. I mean, it's burn season right now still, but even though our burn season is ending pretty early this year because of the conditions. And actually, to be fair, we have had these meetings a couple months earlier in the past before spring burning season, and I think we'll be trying for that again next year. Things got a little behind this year for various reasons, including the hiring of a new state forester here in Oregon. So yeah, that would be the plan though. And this is a minimum amount that we're supposed to meet. We have met twice a year, not every single year, but we will be meeting twice a year at minimum moving forward. And so yeah, that's the goal, is to meet in November. And I thought it might not be the best time to meet just because of the potential weather impacts, but open for discussion. Amanda?
I think your suggestion is good, Amanda. I work in Salem, so it's always very easy for me to make in-person meetings, and I know that that's not the same for everybody. So I think having virtual and then offering our in-person meeting hybrid as well is good to make sure that we get attendance. So I would keep with the hybrid, um, and then yeah, the kind of the virtual option. One thing I did want to ask, kind of going back to the conversation around chair and a vice chair, is we don't have anything in the charter around terms for that either. And so making sure that we also clarify that and work that into when those meetings occur. So if we want to talk about having a spring and a fall meeting, and at which meeting we do the voting to align with the term of chair and vice chair, that could be helpful information.
Yeah, that's great. I really appreciate you mentioning those things. I added those to my notes, and I'll throw something out there to kick around because at the next meeting when I provide the draft charter for review, we can tweak it and then approve it at that point. But I think that's smart to align the voting timeframes with terms as well. That's good feedback. Does anyone else have any thoughts on the meeting, virtual versus hybrid?
My home base is LeGrand, so Salem's a long ways away from it. So the hybrid works best for me, and I do prefer meetings to be either in person or hybrid, or virtual. But the hybrid piece is often difficult. It's difficult for me to make out what people are actually saying when some of them are in a big room and I'm off in the hinterland. So kind of like that option of like we're either together or we're all doing the same computer thing. And for me, if you do go to doing an in-person one, the fall time, I'm more likely to be able to catch you. The springtime for me is crazy busy. So hybrid is, I'm catching this today sitting in a parking lot of it.
That helps, John, and I feel you on that. I know that hybrid can be really challenging in terms of the accessibility and the having everyone having equal footing in terms of communicating. Mike?
As Amanda Sullivan would know, I'm in Klamath, and so I attend most meetings virtual. I just can't get up and down to Salem in that area. So I'd like the option available similar to this. And I'm not sure what you mean by hybrid. Sorry, but
Oh, that's
I like
okay.
the option of virtual. I mean, I can try to make in person, but I do like the option of virtual. Plus, well, the public will always be that option will always be available to the public, right?
Yeah, that's a really good point, Mike. In some ways, if we're going to be fair to the public, we kind of need to make one of them hybrid at minimum, because virtual is always going to be available, and the in-person aspect is really great, but it really is about how many people show up. And so if it's just a couple of us, it's nice, but it actually kind of does a disservice to those who can't be there. So I've heard that we need to make, I've heard a couple suggestions. One is one virtual, one hybrid, and I've heard one virtual, one in person. Um, I haven't heard anyone say they want it all hybrid or all virtual. So we only have a couple minutes before we need to open up for public comment. So does anyone want to have any last thoughts on this before we?
I would be happy if we went all virtual and we just met this way.
Okay.
But I do recognize that it'd be cool too to meet people in person. So not sure what's in the best interest of the community, but I think for many of us, virtual is what works best. And that's what's going to make the easiest interface for members of the public.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you on that, John.
I'd say we could change the charter to say virtual or hybrid, with the idea that you can try to do one of them hybrid if you'd like to, but just to make it as easy as possible on everybody, and you especially.
That's a good one. Okay. All right. I'm gonna put a comment in for myself on that. We will finalize this decision at our next meeting. We've got a bunch of good input. We've got a bunch of good options. I think what has been ruled out is all in person and all hybrid. So, and I think actually leaving it open for us to decide is a good idea, like putting the option on the table. The main thing is I didn't like that it said it had to be hybrid. And so, and we're clearly not following our own charter today because it's not. Okay, well, we're going to open it up for public comment now. Oh, we have folks in the waiting room. I'm going to admit those folks. And then, yes, it's time for public comment. Who has public comment to make?
I'm not sure I have something to say, but
Okay, great. Lori
I couldn't
Adams. Go
I
ahead.
couldn't find the little hand to put my hand up. So um I just want to say, so Laurie Adams, I have a Kalamataka Ranch and out in Central Oregon and a private landowner. Have been working with ODF for over 10 years at working our 80 acres to get it fire resistant and in doing lots of different ways. My employee went to the last year to the burn training and became a CBM trainer. And we weren't able to do a burn last spring after his class. We were able to do one this year, but I would say the process needs to be easier. And there were lots of hurdles and we were just doing a very small area. We did an acre and a half, and we brought out the ODF and the foresters um, and pre-looked at it, and it was really simple. It's right next to my headquarters, so I have a lot to want to make sure it doesn't get out of control. But the process was very difficult, um, and I think you are aware of that. But just trying to make it easier, and then my Brian Tolbert, my manager there. He's supposed to have 3 burns in 3 years. Well, if we don't get, I mean, he's going to lapse and have to take the class again. So just more of the opportunities to try to get more of these burns so that, and we really want to be able to do it for ourselves. Really appreciate everybody that showed up. We had a huge community that came up and showed up, but it was not an easy process. So
Thank you, Lori. I really appreciate you sharing about that. Um, I feel you. Paul, your turn.
Hey, thanks, Amanda. My comment is related to CBM trainees. I'm a current CBM. I went through the course and everything, and I know that it can be tough to kind of decide who can get their task book issued, but I found it to be an obstacle that my fire experience is all as an ICT 5, FFT 1. And so I would just suggest that there be some type of way that folks who have significant fire experience can have a pathway to get their task book issued, because right now I'm in a position where I'm having a hard time finding the prescribed burns to actually get issued my task book. And I guess from my perspective, I see myself as a 5-year experienced hand crew leader, been in a leadership position on back burns and fire, and then someone who goes to one Trex and holds a tool. They can get issued their CBM, and to me that seems there should be some way to evaluate someone's capacity to receive their task book, and that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. I really appreciate that feedback, and it is noted. Um, Ari.
Hi everyone, Ariel Cowan, Oregon State University Extension Regional Fire Specialist. I do also go by Ari. I want to add to what Lori Adams had shared. It was really wonderful that we were able to get that small burn done, and we want to have it happen again. And all the issues that she had experienced took a long time to go through that process. It seems that it's really coming down to that the staff that are making these decisions to support landowners and issue those burn permits don't necessarily have the training to read a burn plan or know what the and that helps to have that flow chart now, but still I think the training part would be really important because they're still considering how they issue the burn permit based on pile burning. instead of understanding how it would be based on broadcast burning. And so those districts then are choosing to be more risk adverse and saying no more. And that hampers the ability to create more CBMs. So it's hampering the whole point of the CBM program. And I've even had that district forester approach me after that burn occurred and said, well, I'm not getting direction from above, and that's the reason why I won't do this. And so just, I think it helps to hear from everyone who's involved what's creating those barriers. So yeah, I would look forward to hearing more if any training programs would be coming out or just even some structuring thinking for staff to think about the differences between broadcast burn and pile burn and burn permits. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you for that feedback. That's really helpful. This is the kind of stuff we need to hear. I want to make sure others in the group who are here from the public have a chance to comment and chime in if they have any thoughts they want to share.
I had one other thought, which was, sorry if, is that I feel like it was really great. Rich gave us some really great information as a landowner on the value. I've lived in a ponderosa forest for the last 30 years, and so I understand the necessity, but having landowner education on the benefits to the forest and the benefits, because we've all grown up with that, put the fire out. So even after, as I'm sitting watching, I just thinking some really good education. I read the book Finding the Mother Tree, and that's got me all excited. But just more of the public, even public, not even landowners, would be really helpful too.
Thank you, Lori. That's great feedback. Okay, we got a couple minutes left for anyone else who wants to chime in. Okay, well, I'll just offer one thought, which is kind of tying it all together from everything I've heard. This is a brand new. It's a new program. It's not brand new anymore, but it is new still, and it's still evolving, and we're still learning. Oh, Mike, did you want to chime in?
Well, I think this is applicable. Amanda and others can pipe in, but so this year, NRCS offered a class so that you could write not only forest plans for NRCS, but burn plans. Because I got a request from our ODF office if I was interested in writing burn plans for NRCS. So I went through the training for NRCS on how to become a technical advisor. And one of the things from NRCS is you have to demonstrate that you've written 2 or 3 forest plans. You have to give them an example. So then that was no problem. But then you also have to give them an example of 2 or 3 or 4 burn plans that you have written and prepared for NRCS. And that's where I kind of ran into a little bit of a roadblock, because my history with the BLM is I reviewed burn plans. I was taught to review. I signed off on burn plans. I didn't actually quote write them, but I implemented them and I signed off on it. So I don't know if that fits into the same spectrum that we're talking about, but there might be barriers even with implementing NRCS burn plans as well because of that challenge. I don't know if others have run into that.
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up. For those who aren't aware, when we developed the Certified Burn Manager program, we worked closely with NRCS, specifically Andrew Owen, the state forester, and I ensured that everything within the Oregon Certified Burn Manager program fulfilled their requirements for technical service providers so that those would sync up. And so our burn plans meet their requirements. Everything is fairly seamless. But what remains is they have their own additional requirements that we have no say about and we have nothing to do with. So unfortunately, There's not much I can do about the requirements for becoming a technical service provider, which, by the way, it gives you access to working for and through NRCS on projects. So it's potentially funded work. And for those who are trained to do this, making a living, it's great. John Punches can speak to this more adequately than I can probably at this point because he's teaching that class. So maybe you would like to chime in, Mike.
Well, I was just going to say, I don't know if it fits here or not, or if you've got a spot later on for what we're planning to do, but one of the gaps, needs that I've identified is helping people understand how to best write burn plans in the CBM style. And there's not really does a really good job of helping people evaluate and implement, but we really didn't design it to be a plan writing class. So starting this winter, probably this fall, I'm going to try to offer a mentored process where we can guide some people through writing burn plans. And it'll be a pilot project for this fall and winter, but then that hopefully will give people some opportunity to start thinking about how we approach that. Maybe we can roll that out and do more of that in the future. So think of CBM as kind of a first step for many people, and then there's still another piece in there to get really good at writing the burn plans. So that's coming up for this fall. The other thing is, to speak to some of the needs for those training opportunities. It's challenging. So I've done several prescribed fires this spring. They're a lot of work, and so for me to host those, I was able to get one person to the point where I'll, issue a final evaluation for that person and send it back to Amanda. But there's just a lot of work that goes into that. So again, please be patient. We do need to get to the point where we've got CBMs who are really comfortable being the mentor and signing off on the field books and getting people to the point where they can get that final certification. Every person needing 3. I think I've personally trained well over 100 people. So that's 300 burns. And I can't offer 300 burns. We got to get a bigger community offering those burns.
Yeah, I've got some numbers to share on that today too. So it's kind of a good segue into the next agenda item, which is training deliveries, updates, and feedbacks. But we could really just make this about training and community and continuing education, because what John's talking about is a continuing education class that he and I have been discussing putting together. We actually almost tried to pull it off this winter, late winter, early spring, but we just realized we didn't have enough time to do a quality job on it. So we decided to delay until the fall. And then another piece of information is that Washington DNR has funding for the creation of a burn plan writing class. And I've put him in contact with the Willamette Ignitions Network, who I believe are going to be entering into an agreement or some kind of contract with them to try to create that class. If that happens, we're hoping that we can import it and then make it our own if that happens. So we may have something to work with, John, or we may try to sync up with them just to make sure everybody's on the same page. A question in the chat, can ODF staff who issue burn permits be encouraged to take the burn plan writing course? Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And we certainly have 2 lanes of growth here, 2 growth edges at ODF, and one is internal and one is external. External is through the CBM program and the work that we're doing, partnering and collaborating to get trainings put on and help folks get certified. But the internal side is our own folks learning and becoming comfortable with this. And it's a wide range, depending on how much burning has been happening on the district already, the staff's experience with prescribed fire, because it's just not equal across the board. So we're all learning, and we're also taking feedback as to how we can improve things so that it's better for everyone. So this is really good feedback from everyone today. I really appreciate it. Let's see. I am gonna share my screen really quick, and it'll probably bleed over into the CBM updates a little bit, but I think that's okay. This is just to show you guys some numbers relative to training. And these are the deliveries here I think you guys should be able to see that now. So these are all the trainings we've had. We started in fall 2023, right after the rules had been established, and we had a committee, and we were ready to roll. I actually expected things to be delayed until the spring of 2024, but we had a delivery from that was put on through Lane Community College, and they essentially took some curriculum that had already been developed for the California Burn Boss, the CARX is what they call it, their version of the Certified Burn Manager. They took that curriculum and adapted it for our purposes and then taught it as part of a class. It's probably, I'm glad this is not happening anymore because it was integrated into like a term, and it was kind of challenging because not all the students were really ready for it. So now all the classes are being delivered, not as part of an existing college class. So the next round was in spring 2024 down in Central Point, and then in Corvallis. Chris Adlam and John Punches took the lead on those classes respectively. In fall of 2024, we delivered in Roseburg in partnership with the Umpqua Prescribed Burn Association, ODF, and OSU Extension, as well as Douglas Fire Protection Association. And then there was another training delivery through LCC that year. And then we also delivered in Sisters, and John took the lead on that one. In fall of 2025, another round of training was delivered in Sisters, and then in LeGrand and Eugene. And then in spring of 2026, we've had deliveries in Spray and Port Orford. So that's kind of the timeline. And what that leads into is, I should probably be doing this in presentation mode. Hold on. Is that currently we need, and these are the people that have certification books. That's important to note. There's a lot of people that have been through the class who never reached out to me asking for a field certification book, or if they did, they didn't have the prerequisite experience that Paul Catino is referring to, which is that you have participated on 3 prescribed burns. And he's not the only person that's approached me asking for a field certification book based on wildfire suppression experience. Just to address why we have it set up that way, not saying we're not open to adjusting it, but that a planned event of a prescribed fire is quite different than the reaction to or response to a wildfire, in the sense that there's a lot that goes into it in advance, and then once you're actually doing the work, you're trying to meet prescribed fire objectives, and those are almost invariably quite different than wildfire suppression objectives, which usually involve putting the fire out. They may have some protective measures in terms of not causing resource damage, but typically you're not trying to induce a certain effect on the landscape as a result, whether that be ecological, cultural, or a reduction of hazard. You're literally just fighting fire with fire, which is great. I wish we applied more prescribed fire tactics in that space, and I think we will in the future. We are now, even, honestly. But what this means is right here, just for the people we have as trainees right now, we need 117 burns at minimum for certification, and that's minimum. The 3 burns is not, I've done my 3 burns and I get my certification now. That means you're ready to be evaluated, and you may need to do an additional burn if there is determined that that is not adequate for some reason. So this is a real issue, right? And the comments that were made are referring to this to some extent, which is if we need these burns within ODF protection and there's a reticence about doing so for various reasons, some of which are very valid and some of which may be perceptual or just based on an experience, then, we have an issue here. Amanda, go ahead. You just raised your hand.
Yeah, I had a question initially, and I think as it sits right now, there's like 2 levels, I believe, of qualification where you can just be like pile burning or broadcast burning. And so I'm curious what the breakdown is between those two. Has everybody in this, within these numbers asked for or trained towards the broadcast burning, or are there mostly pile burning? Because, big advocate for this when it first got put in to 762 was from the Oregon Small Woodlands Association, and thinking about all the folks who just want to burn piles and want to have some coverage. So I'm just curious what that breakdown is if you have it.
Yeah. So I'm going to say I'm going to just guess that it follows. I don't have these broken down. I have the certifications broken down, but of course you're going to ask the question, which is good. We currently have 19 people that are just pile, and then we have 59 people that are certified for broadcast and understory burning. So it's roughly in that, a quarter to a third. And that's, I mean, just pulling it off the top of my head, out of this number of 39 people, I would say, yeah, about 5 to 10 of them are just seeking a pile certification. Most of them are looking for the broadcast understory. Some of that's because broadcast understory includes pile. There are some folks who have gone ahead and gotten the pile certification and then are pursuing the broadcast understory. Some are just pursuing the broadcast understory. But it's important to note that you only need the experience of the type for which you are seeking certification. So if you just want pile burning, you only have to have that. But if you only have pile burning experience, then we ask that you have broadcast experience before you open up a task book for the broadcast understory CBM. Does that get close? I will promise you harder numbers next time.
Yeah. Yeah,
I
Amanda, I
track
guess,
the CBMs proper really well. The trainees are, until they come back for certification, it's hard to know how far they're going to make it.
yeah, and I think the 117 seems like a really scary number. But as I think about it, we have talked, and I think part of how this will be accomplished is through chunking up burns, right? And potentially giving trainees a a specific area to be in charge of. And so I don't know if that kind of went into the 117 number as well as those that just have the pile burning need, but that looks a lot more scary than maybe it needs to.
Yeah, and I think that's important because we want people to have quality experiences of the type of burning that we can expect that they're going to be managing and leading, right? So we don't want to dilute the experience so much that I'm going to stop sharing so we can face each other and I can see the chat. Okay. Um, okay. So, sorry, I got distracted there for a second by a comment in the chat. So I have said, yes, it's okay to block the burns out into units for the sake of training. What I have said no to is I don't want two CBM trainees on the same burn, because you need to have the experience of taking responsibility as the responsible party, as the burn lead. And so I don't want folks to, be double dipping on the same burn unit. But yes, they're getting blocked out. There's a lot of ways to be creative about it. Most of these burns are not huge landscape burns. They're not, 2,000 acres. People are burning pretty small areas. So, all right. I just want to note really quick, because you sent this comment and I think it's important that I circle back. As far as the public comment period and the charter was concerned, we went into public comment, and then the question about whether or not we're coming back to the charter. I had gotten through as much as I felt like we needed to with that, but we can circle back to that towards the end if that makes sense. Just to make sure if there's anything anybody else wants to see changed in the charter, please follow up. In order to keep us on schedule, though, I think I'll not circle back to that at this time. But thanks, Amanda, for pinging me on that.
Amanda,
Okay.
I'd
Yeah.
like to say something. I just want to support kind of what you just said about not reducing the quality of the training for the trainees, because I feel like we're kind of focused on making sure everybody gets qualified as CBMs and really moving that number. Uh, I don't think that we should reduce the quality of the training, because this is a serious certification and it's serious work, and especially with the liability program behind it, like this is important work that needs real training. So trying to streamline it to maximize the output of CBMs, I don't think is something we should focus on, at least reducing the quality of the training. Like figuring out how to have more opportunities to do burning by educating ODF staff who might be limiting opportunities to do prescribed burns is where I think we should try and focus our efforts if we can.
Agreed, 100%. I can't echo what Aaron just said enough. And I think there's an eagerness to get certified and folks are really wanting it, but I think we all need to slow down. I mean, if I'm going to go into this in a minute, but we have a lot of people certified in Oregon at this point. So, we do need to get people through and we need to make sure that's thoughtful and that their assignments are good quality assignments. And it's there's two sides to it. One is you learn when you start doing it by yourself, and then you learn while you're training. But the reality is, if you don't get good training assignments, you're not going to be prepared to succeed on your own. So I think that's really important.
And I'd also like to comment on the 3 burns to get your certification book, because even to a degree, that seems low to me. If you really look at what an RXB2, which we're not trying to be that, but the amount of experience on prescribed burns someone like that would have before their task book was opened, participating in 3 burns is a really small number. And I understand Paul's comment about wanting to recognize suppression experience, but I've also had a protection supervisor who was a division soup in a type 4 IC deny a permit because he was certain that you start prescribed burns at the bottom of the hill and they rush up the hill. So there can be a major disconnect between being a really experienced wildland firefighter and being a prescribed burn practitioner. So I don't envy your position determining who can get a task book or a certificate book, Amanda.
Yes. Thanks for that. Yeah, so I think it's important to acknowledge all of this because it is tricky, and I know when you see what happens at treks and people who don't have as much experience, there's the question, is 3 burns enough experience to get a certification book? There's a lot of questions. This is part of why we're looking at cracking open these rules and that's part of why you can all anticipate meeting more in the next year to 2 years, because there will be a process for looking at that stuff. And I would encourage everybody, well, I will give an assignment at the end that everybody needs to dig into those rules to get ready for the next meeting. So I want to really quickly address Michael Rhodes' question, qualifying CBM burn events. Michael, can you clarify your question really quick?
Yeah, you mentioned it just a few minutes ago about you said that there's been a decision that no 2 CBMs could not get a sign off. I'm doing air quotes for the same event, but there was something right before that that addressed dividing a unit into segments, maybe when that's part of a larger burn operation. Could you just go through that again so I know I'm hearing it correctly?
Yeah, so when I was approached by, it was coming out of the Rogue Valley, I was asked, well, how are we going to get all these people through their certification with all the burns that we need to do? Can we do 2 CBMs per burn? And I said, no, that doesn't make sense. But if you want to block them out and say a unit was going to be 10 acres, but there's a road through the middle, make it into 2 units and assign one to each CBM. So that's essentially what I was referring to. Does that make sense?
It does. I guess I would assume then that CBM trainee is responsible for the operational briefing, the supervision of operations, handoff back to landowner, etc., for their respective units. Is that the expectation?
Yeah, more or less. I mean, you just treat it as its own burn, its own unit, go through all the whole process on its own. I mean, that said, the way that the rules are written, um, you can go through stuff in the field certification book and get signed off, and it's just preparing to burn. And then say you don't get to burn that day, you can still count that process that you went through. Micah Schmidt from Extension reached out to me just a couple days ago because OSU's got some restrictions on their staff's ability to burn on certain lands. And so he wanted to know if he could provide signatures for certain aspects of that going into it, but not the burn itself. And yes, that's technically okay. So, it's really that you need a minimum of 3 assignments. If someone came to me with a certification book and all 3 assignments were getting ready to burn and they never put fire on the ground, then clearly that wouldn't go through. But you should document everything you can in that field certification book. There's a lot of fields in there for a reason. We didn't just put 3 in there for a reason because, we want to see all the assignments that you can get to really create a good package for yourself to get through the certification process. And we've only had I think 6 people total, if you count both pile and broadcast burning, who've gone from training all the way through their certification. Everyone else we have currently qualified under historical recognition.
Thank you for those clarifications.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks for asking. John, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I was just thinking back to our conversation about what's the right metric or screening criteria for when somebody gets that field certification. I would just suggest that, or the task book rather, the field book, to suggest that maybe that goes on our agenda. Maybe that's already what you're thinking for next time. Let's have a conversation. Like if we're going to make some suggestions higher up for how we might want to make some changes to the program, that seems like one we want to address. Just have a thoughtful conversation about what does it really take there? Because I'm uncomfortable with just saying 3 burns. As we're all aware, people could come in with 3 burns that are like, well, they went to 3 burns and didn't really do anything and didn't really get an experience, but they went on 3 burns. And other people who have a ton of experience that's just like not quite the right thing that matches our current screening criteria. So let's have that conversation at some point.
I agree, John. It's going on the agenda for next time. Thank you. Tim.
Just a question about a qualifying burn. Does it have to be a burn that is under a burn plan that is associated with a certified burning program, or can it be on a federal or a tribal prescribed fire?
Well, the CBM burn plan is not the key factor, although that's the template we provide. We don't require that it be used. If you want to use a different template, you can, as long as it has all the same information in it. What it really has to do with is if you follow the CBM program rules and you are within ODF protection. So federal burns are not within ODF protection, those don't count. Cultural burns, if they fall within ODF protection, would count. But there's some nuances there as well. So yes, it essentially means that you follow the rules of the CBM program and you are within ODF protection and you do all the things that are required under the rules.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Can I add to that though? And correct me if
Yeah.
I'm wrong in my interpretation. People doing those burns should be strongly encouraged to keep records and submit that because it's part of what builds their overall package.
Correct.
But it's part of the overall package of their experience that's going to make Amanda comfortable saying, yes, I think you're ready to go. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, you're absolutely right. We want as much detail as possible. I had someone request a field certification book recently who just said the last 3 burns that he had been on, and I said, okay, just so you know, we strongly encourage getting more experience if this is it. And then he responded with a bunch more stuff. And I think that's one thing we need to clarify with those going through the program is that they need to provide as complete a records as they possibly can. It doesn't mean I won't issue a field certification book, but I would prefer to have that information because if we end up having an investigation because of something happening, then we want as much detail about that person's experience and background as possible. And it gives me more justification for decision making about certification. So yes, that's correct. This is really good discussion. And a comment from Mike in the chat. Yes, and he's correct. It's only going to take one loss and or one escape or one issue. And a lot of what we're doing here is trying to keep this program in the right space. And it's a dance because we're coming out of a history of having things being quite restrictive, and we're trying to open up some doors, but we're doing so in a manner that hopefully increases the pace and scale of prescribed fire without increasing the pace and scale of wildfire. So,
I don't disagree with Mike, but I'm always confused by that sentiment. I've heard it many times because pile burns escape all the time, and we never hear about stopping all pile burning and not preventing pile burning from ever happening again. So why is there this different idea that if a understory burn escapes, now we're going to stop all understory burning? It's always just been confusing to me because we have dozens and dozens and dozens of escaped pile burns all the time, but that idea never seems to come to mind.
Well, I would disagree with you a little bit because if you look at the Forest Service, correct me if I'm wrong, but the New Mexico burns last year that escaped were from pile burns. If I might be wrong, but it was my understanding that those burns came back. So I think it's not just for broadcast. Pile burns are when my understanding when Forest Service, and this is we're getting off track, but the Forest Service suspends all prescribed burning in the BLM when we have a major escape. And that's what we don't want to have to face, because otherwise we're going to be talking about 3 times the amount of guidelines and processes. So I agree with you 100% that we need to have where people need to have that experience and that gut reaction of what's it like to be responsible for a burn, because there's nothing like it. Your gut is turning when you're in charge of a burn. And if you don't feel that and you haven't experienced that, I think it's good to experience that. And so I agree that 3 or 4 burns may or may not be enough.
It's the minimum. Tim, did you have something to add?
I just was going to agree with Mike that the Calf Canyon burn in New Mexico was a pile burn that escaped a month after the ignition. Hermit's Peak was a broadcast burn. Both of them made the big fire. So maybe 50% of the escape prescribed fires in Forest Service, my experiences are from broadcast and piles 50-50.
Well, I'm going to bring the real problem into the room, which is debris burning. But we won't go into that because it's not within the purview of our program. But it is the #1 cause of wildfires. And so maybe we should expand the CBM program to training debris burning people. But regardless, no. What did you say, John? No, you're against it.
No.
Okay. Well, anyways, it's true that pile burns tend to be a problem. Why is that though? It's because we light them under conditions where they don't consume completely, and then they start creeping around when it dries out. So that's one of the reasons why, to kind of wrap up the training delivery section of this before we all take a break, this is one of the reasons why everyone gets the same exact training. We don't have a pile training and a broadcast training. We teach everyone the same material and they just practice on the types of burns that they're going to be certified for. So, and yeah, that was by design from the very beginning because of how aware we were that so many pile burns are the source of escapes. And, we haven't tested this program out. My goal in the risk management side is to ensure that our trainings are good and that our field certification processes are solid, so that we manage risk to keep ourselves out of the space of escapes and liability and that sort of thing. But it's true that one mistake can cause a lot of setbacks for everyone. So that's part of why we're so vigilant in this program. I think just with a couple minutes we have before we go to break, I just want to make it clear that if there's anything in the charter that I didn't cover that folks think we need to edit or change, feel free to bring that up after the break before we get into the updates on CBMs, because I don't necessarily have a full 20 minutes on that because we kind of cut into that a little bit here. So let's just plan for when we come back, we'll circle back and close out on the charter for anything else that we didn't get to in that section. Does that sound good to everybody? Any more thoughts or comments on the topic at hand of training? And we're really talking about both classroom and field training deliveries, and then what the prerequisite requirements are for opening up a field certification book.
I guess I'll say one thing. In the past, I had asked about creating a manual for people who are RXB2s who get kind of grandparented into the position, and I was wondering if there was any movement on that.
Yeah, that's a good question. I kind of held off on that when OSU Extension started developing this prescribed fire guidebook, and when ODF at the same time was working on drafting our manual. So I wanted to have that done first. Now we're looking at doing some rule changes, which would then lead to some policy changes prior to creating our CBM manual. So there's some of that's been delayed by these other processes, but I think at this point we could endeavor that concurrent now with what we've got, so that, because you're bringing up a real issue, which is people with a ton of experience as type 2 burn bosses who have not worked within the state system, and so they don't necessarily understand some of those nuances of working with ODF specifically and what the state laws and regulations are. So I appreciate you bringing that up because that is still on the list,
Thank
but
you.
it's been delayed along with radio frequencies, but that kind of got dealt with the agreements with ODF and such. Okay, Amanda, yes.
Amanda, I think way back, I think there's a draft of such a manual.
Yes, it was from the early days.
Yep.
Yep. And so we have a start on it. We just kind of held off on it because of
Okay.
the other.
I'm happy to revisit that if it's useful.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's get with Aaron. He volunteered.
Yeah, I just had a question about that point. I think, Aaron, that's a really good idea. Um, so would it mostly be around like where there's sort of equivalencies and sort of reciprocity between different the different qualifications, and then what else you would need to do in addition or something like is that kind of what you're looking at?
I think what we were looking at was like taking the rules and putting them into like a book that was kind of easier to digest and follow, and maybe some other elements of like best practices working with ODF. But I don't know, Aaron and John can speak to it too.
It was more about the differences within permitting and requirements that as it's working on federal land, you don't necessarily have to follow. So if someone hadn't burned on private ODF districts before, they might not really understand all the nuance to that permitting process. And so a way to help educate them about that.
Right. And just setting that expectation at a reasonable level for private lands. If you're used to writing federal burn plans, they're really long. They've got a lot of stuff in them, and they derive out of a NEPA document, whereas our private land stuff are far less likely to have that level of verbiage. But I think we just keep them really focused. And so that combination of helping people really understand what the expectations of this program are, pointing them to some examples, and then really understanding what the permitting process is, what the notification expectations are, the things that are, as Aaron puts, different from what you'd be doing if you're doing an RXP 2 or 1 job in a federal agency.
Okay. I just want to be clear that it sounds like what you guys are saying is optional, something that people could look at if they wanted to, not like a required additional piece of training. Because, like, for instance, we manage the Oregon Professional Logger Program, and we have reciprocity with other surrounding states. But because we know that Oregon's OSHA laws and our forest practices are different than, say, Washington, we will take their qualification from Washington, but we require them to take our forest practices and or OSHA training classes because there's enough different that we need them to do that to qualify for our program. So it's not something like that. It's more like, hey, what you've done is enough to earn the CBM, but here's some things that may be different or new to you. Is that more, am I, okay. I just want to make sure that, like, in the context of training, that I'm understanding the purpose.
It would be kind of like a teaching tool slash it's something as an assisting, but not as an additional requirement.
I think of it as like a reference guide.
Yeah, and this
quick reference.
It relates back to why I created the flow chart, which we'll talk about later. For those of you who haven't seen that yet. Okay, in order of how they've appeared, Mike Bechtold and then Kai Sauerberg.
So Aaron, I just, sorry to beat up the manual, but I think it's a good idea. But is it sidewalk or side by side with the template that you have developed, Amanda and Aaron? Because we have a prescribed pile and broadcast burn template. So is the manual would supplement that to tell you how you fill it out, or is it something completely different?
Yeah, it is different. It would not exactly tell you how to write the burn plan. And I mean, the way I've always seen it is the burn plan was designed to guide anyone through the process so that they make sure they get their permits and smoke clearances and do what they're supposed to do. This was, an idea to help those who are coming out of the federal system adapt to and adjust to these different requirements.
Okay, that makes sense.
That's really what it was. That was the intent anyways. Not that it would just target that audience, but that was where that need was coming from. Kai.
Yeah, it seems like you could just pull the pertinent information out of the developed curriculum for state policy, notifications, and burn permitting, and that would really be all you would need to do. I hear John, and your concern, John, around folks who are used to writing NWCG plans having to taper down to write a private land plan. And yet I don't really view that as much of a problem, in my opinion. If they're overwriting a burn plan, they're overwriting a burn plan. That's on them. But I think um, for this, as someone who like has gone through that from a federal burn boss to one that also operates on private lands, the toughest part for me was figuring out how ODF policy differs district to district and like west of the Cascades versus east of the Cascades. And so like those like key pieces that should already be in the curriculum, I think is really all you would need, in my opinion.
Yeah, and this brings up the question of should we be making those that we're historically recognizing or offering reciprocity to do training like Amanda's speaking of? Should they have to go take our exam or should they have to take the classroom training but not the field component? Yeah. I mean, yeah, and I hear what you're saying. And this is just a question. I'm not proposing one way or another. Um, but I will say that we have the most generous reciprocity in the United States in Oregon. And that could be viewed as a very good thing, and it could be viewed as opening ourselves up a little bit too much. So, that said, I review those very closely to see what kind of burning they've been doing and that sort of thing. So it really has to do with, are they reading our laws? Are they working closely with ODF? And in theory, ODF staff should be shepherding you through that process. Um, I'm gonna go ahead and call it on this section for now so we can all get a break. And we're a little behind, so I'm going to say that we should plan to be back at 2:35, and we'll talk a little. We're going to probably continue a lot of the discussion that we're already having, and go from there. So yes, I'll see you all back here at 2:35. All right, folks, I have 2:35 on my clock. Is everyone back? Kai is here. All right. I'm going to wait just a second. Okay, we got a couple more people. I'm specifically wanting to tap Amanda to chat a little bit about some ideas about charter stuffs before we move into the next agenda item, which is just talking about certified CBMs and trainees, which we already got into a fair bit. Thanks for your patience, everyone, with moving around. I think since this is her idea and I can just present it, I'm going to do that. She has an idea that we might consider forming a subcommittee out of this group today to look at reciprocity with other states and come back with a recommendation about the guidebook and reciprocity in general, and then we could vote on that at the next meeting. How do folks feel about that on the committee? Good idea? Mike, what do you think?
Can you expand a little bit on what we would be accepting? So do we really visualize Washington or California burn bosses coming in Oregon? And would we require them to? So basically, if we got a subcommittee, we would talk about what requirements Oregon would require. Can you just expand a little bit, Amanda, on what you're asking?
Yeah, so I made the comment that we have very generous reciprocity. And so maybe I could tell you about how some other states do it for reference. I believe it's Alabama that they only offer reciprocity to adjacent states where they're burning in similar fuel types. And so that's their limitation on it. I don't know of any other state that offers it, sort of across the board. Hi, Amanda. I'm jumping in here, even though I know in the chat I asked you to talk about this. I went ahead and jumped into your comment. And so we're talking
Okay.
about the first piece, which is having a subcommittee to review reciprocity. And Mike had some questions. So right off the top of my head, Mike, I think we've got like 4 or 5 burn bosses who are not in the state of Oregon who are CBMs. So it's a question of how much does that merit a committee and their time to look at that. I think again, I haven't had a huge amount. I've had, let's see, Texas, Louisiana, Washington, and California are the states where I've had requests for reciprocity. And those states are quite different in their requirements and how they handle things, just based on the kind of burning that's happening in those states. Of those, one of them went through training and then used their certification from another state to augment their classroom and field certification here in Oregon. The others were just a full granting of reciprocity. So that's a question of whether or not the volume of requests for that merits the formation of a committee, or should we just wrap that into the rule review process that's coming on down the pipe? I think that I could see it either way, and I'd like to hear more from the group. So maybe I'll just ask that others chime in on this if they think that's something we should do. There's another recommendation, which is forming a subcommittee to go through and work on the charter. And I'm going to vote for that if I have one, because I'd like the help. But let's go with the first one, which is whether or not we should have a subcommittee that forms to review our reciprocity with other states and then make a recommendation about that and the guidebook. And I think I want to clarify there really quick. The guidebook's not just for the reciprocity with other states. The guidebook's actually more so for folks within Oregon who spent their career burning federally and then moved over, like Kai and I both did. We got trained up through the Forest Service and other agencies, federal agencies, and then we moved over to working on private and other landscapes. And so, yeah, I think we have some interested parties who want to work on the guidebook, and maybe that includes some recommendations for reciprocity, but I do think they're different things. All right, I'm going to be quiet. Amanda.
Yeah. I think just to add a clarifier for that first piece and why I added the guidebook in there. And Aaron, I'm probably totally messing up all of your stuff now. But my thought is kind of back to this comment around equivalencies, right? And so whether that's state to state equivalencies, federal to state, to me, it's like clarifying, like creating more clarity around that piece. Just in general is like something that a group of like-minded people may be interested in sort of both things, right? Um, but the other reason that I suggested subcommittees is for both of these items, for the charter and for this piece, is because our charter right now says we're only supposed to meet 2 times a year. If we want to accomplish work and get things done, we're probably going to have to do that through subcommittee where people really hammer this stuff out and then come with recommendations to the group. So that is why I feel like for this body in particular, where we are not like a monthly meeting entity, having those types of groups that are really hammering these details out to me makes sense. So I'm just going to put that out there. I suggested the two, so I am for the two. And I'll probably volunteer for one of them.
Excellent. Other comments on this?
I think subcommittees are a great idea. I think the reciprocity thing is something we should look into, even if it's only a few people. It only takes one person to make that mistake that Mike was talking about that might come back on us poorly. So I think it would behoove us to kind of look into what the requirements are in other states. From what I've heard, some of them are fairly loose. And again, burning in completely different types. I wouldn't necessarily feel comfortable going and burning in the southeast either. So I wouldn't think it would be appropriate to give me a CBM down there. So I think that the opposite holds as well. And the guidebook, I think, honestly doesn't have to be that big of a deal. Like Kai said, I think you could just take a few things out of the training curriculum and hand a few pages to the people who are getting grandparented in. It doesn't have to be that big of a deal.
John.
Yeah, I'm on the same page there, and I was just going to say that I think that let's figure out the reciprocity thing, and then when we develop the guidebook, it can, I think, work for both audiences because there's going to be similar questions.
All right. Amanda, which of these two groups do you want to be a part of, and are you willing to take the lead on that subcommittee formation?
I, as you are probably not going to be very surprised, would be happy to do the charter. I'm
Cool.
not a burn practitioner, so I feel like I have less experience in that space. I have burned, but I'm not, I was never qualified for any sort of burn boss or anything like that. So with my expertise on policy and that side, I'd be happy to help with the charter stuff with you, Amanda.
Great. I appreciate that very much. Does anyone else want to work on the charter edits and updates to present at the next meeting with Amanda and I? I don't know, Mike, is that a thumbs up because you want to join us? Or is it a thumbs up because you think
I'll
it's
be glad to help
Yeah.
with the reciprocity and the
Okay.
charter.
Okay, so Mike's going to take the lead on the reciprocity and charter, and then I'm going to just guess that at minimum John Punches is going to want to be in on that, and maybe Aaron too. I'm not trying to volunteer you guys.
Well, I don't know if I want to take the lead. I'd just be glad to provide input because
Okay.
my burning experience is starting to fade, but I have quite a bit.
Okay, let's say Amanda and I are going to do the charter. Amanda Squared is going to do the charter, and then Mike and who else is going to take on that reciprocity? I can take the lead on it. I don't mind scheduling and getting us going.
I'd be happy to jump in on that, Amanda. I'm a certified burner in 2 other states. It could be helpful.
All right.
Well, that's
Cool. Did they take our reciprocity or did you get through it separate?
I got qualified in North and South Carolina before Oregon.
That's right. Oh, cool. What a great reference point. Okay. Who else but wants to join? I mean, John, I'm volunteering you because you already started that guidebook a couple of years ago, but
I
you
think
don't have
so.
to.
So I'm happy to help with guidebook.
Mhm.
Reciprocity could be a conversation in which we decide some criteria for what qualifies, or it could be we're investigating every state's programs and determining in advance which ones qualify, and that sounds like a really big job.
No, we're not going
And
to do it that way. Not the latter.
yeah,
That's too much. No,
so
no, we're going to come up with some criterion because right
yeah,
now, all it is me reviewing
yeah.
those
So I
applications
think like
and deciding.
establishing criteria is the right way to go. I'll help with that. I'm just like knowing we're rolling into fire season and I'm going to be gone. So
Yeah, no, it's okay. I mean, I don't think this will be a huge lift. Like we were talking about pulling from the existing curriculum and rules to create, it's just kind of a like CBM for dummies, like quick
yeah, so
reference
that's what
type
I'm saying.
thing.
I'm in my brain. These are two separate things.
I know.
Eddie talking about reciprocity, and then there's a separate thing about crafting a handbook, a guidebook, whatever we're calling it there, right?
Okay.
And I've got a draft of that someplace because early on you and I made a draft of that and it decided we really needed to wait. So I can find that and we can circulate it to interested parties. But I would really recommend that the reciprocity and the handbook be separate discussions. But I do think that reciprocity informs what we want to put in the handbook.
So are you saying you think we should do it in that order then? Have the reciprocity recommendations?
Yep, let's
Okay.
tackle reciprocity, and when we're comfortable with that, then we can craft a guidebook to make sure that we're like addressing some of those key areas.
How do others feel about that? Anyone opposed to John's idea of how to approach that? I think it makes sense. And honestly, I'll be frank, I mean, we do have some framework to work with historical recognition. We could really mirror that and make it pretty simple. It may be like not a whole lot, but let's have that conversation to be able to make a formal recommendation then. Okay, that sounds good. So are we good on that piece then as far as yeah, just making sure that our charter is updated and reflects the developments of the program and the things that we've learned in the past 3 years since it's been finalized. So I think with that, if that sounds like that works for everybody, I'm going to go ahead and move into the next topic.
Amanda,
Yeah.
just really quick, since I was delayed getting back to my seat here, did you mention the other pieces of the charter that I had commented on to you privately?
All I put in, well, you go ahead and no, I
Okay.
didn't. I didn't go into detail. I went
Well, I
into
don't want to.
detail in the first section, but I didn't get into
Okay.
detail in the
I don't
second.
want to surprise people by what we may work out. So, so the other thing that I had commented to Amanda on was in my review of the charter, we talk about voting members and we talk about voting, we talk about elections, but then our only decision-making process is by consensus. And I felt like there was probably a need to clarify when voting should occur versus when consensus, like decision by consensus, was appropriate. I just felt like it was not very clear. And even so much as when we were voting on the chair, I feel like it was a little unclear of what we wanted to do there. So I just wanted to work through that with Amanda on providing some suggestions and recommendations for that part of a revision as well, or a amendment. So anyways, if you see changes on that, I didn't want you to be surprised since we didn't talk about them here.
Yeah, and to that end, do we want to like just quickly flag a date or something by which we want any further feedback from the group before we start hammering that out?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
that's a great idea.
How about the end of June? Does that work for the committee? Okay, so by the end of June, we'll include this in the notes. We'd like recommendations for changes to the charter. Then Amanda and I will be working on that between then and our next meeting in November.
And the only other quick thing I'll mention, Amanda, that I didn't mention in my little comment to you is that we should probably scrub the specific names of staff members and talk about positions just to make it a little bit more evergreen. Not necessarily of the charter members. I do think it's important to keep those in there, but for the staff, because there can be more turnover there. Even like in so much as I think Stacy's in here, And like Stacy's in a different position right now or has been. So, and there's been movement around at ODF. So anyways, we might want to workshop that a little bit too.
Okay, yeah, we can talk about what makes most sense, like identifying positions versus names. And yeah, that sounds like a good thing to address too. Appreciate
Yeah.
it.
And that's where we could bring in some other staff too. I know Stacy's on here. I think Levi's on here and a few other
Yeah,
folks from ODF, but
Stacy does remain the point of contact official as the program manager for the mitigation unit. Um, but so her name's still in there and I think is supposed to be, but we can look at that too. And we can bring her and or Levi in to help us with this too, so that they can make sure we're keeping everything straight.
okay. I just want to make sure that the other advisory committee members were not caught off guard by something that we are
Yeah.
recommending that was not discussed.
No, that makes sense. And also to make sure everybody else has an opportunity to provide input to that process too. That's great. I really appreciate it. Okay. I think with that, I will officially move into, we'll just quickly talk about the CBMs and the trainees. I think this will be a little bit fluid for the rest of the meeting here, but we're going to hit on all this stuff. Okay, I'm going to share again because this is just so you guys have some numbers on where we're at. And so, okay. All right, so really this is just looking at the numbers, following through on where we were starting at or where we were talking about training deliveries and then we got into trainees. So this is just looking at our CBMs and kind of looking at how the program's grown over time. We currently now have 78 folks who are qualified, of whom 19 are pile burn CBMs and 59 are broadcast understory CBMs. We still, I would say, are primarily populated by this group is primarily populated by those who are receiving historical recognition. In 2023, everyone was under historical recognition. And I believe in 2024, that was the year we were able to get our first person through with a full certification. Now, you might be asking what happened in 2025? Grayback Forestry. So what happened there was they went ahead and decided to get all of their burn bosses through CBM. So they're all historical recognition as well. That's not all of the 39 are grayback, but a huge proportion are grayback. And this is interesting because when we started the program and we were setting up the invoicing system and figuring out all of the details, I was asked, how do you expect this program to grow? And I said, well, I think initially we'll get a big influx of folks and then it's going to level out. And that's not what happened because we had such a large group come through the gate. And then will also say that we do have folks that are moving here from other states who are bringing their certifications with them and, are interested in working here in Oregon. And so there's, a fair number of those are also the historical recognition and coming in from other places. In some cases, those folks are coming in with a type 2 burn boss certification and they're not from Oregon. So, it's not exactly the reciprocity that we're talking about. Reciprocity is actually acknowledging another state certification as opposed to RxB2. Yes, Amanda, I see your hand is raised.
I always have questions.
That's great. Love it.
And since I, work for a membership organization, I always
Yeah.
want to like dig into the numbers. Do you know
Mhm.
how many of these folks, like how many companies, like how many people may be associated with a company, like you were talking about Grayback, like that may be helping one company,
Yeah.
right? Like, do you have an idea of how many people are attached to a company or an entity that's like requiring them to get CBM for their insurance purposes and
Yeah.
things like that?
In the interest of protecting personal information, I'm not going to pull up
Yeah,
my master spreadsheet.
yeah,
But what I
totally.
will do, because I already said we're going to be fluid. So since you asked, I'm going to bump over to looking at, hold on, I got to move this. I already have this up, but I need to move this. Okay, not this. Not this. Here we go. So one of the things that we launched this year is a voluntary directory. So that's what I'm showing you guys right now. And so this gives you just those who have actually want to be known, right? So if they have an affiliation, they put it here. So we've got Liberty Creek, Blackline Solutions, Farm Unlimited, Cross Contour LCC,
And
Prometheus.
Amanda, we're still seeing your PowerPoint if you think
Oh,
that you are sharing a different screen.
geez. Thanks for telling me. Okay. Here we go. Walking you through it. You have to change what you're sharing. It wasn't just sharing the screen. So can you see it now?
Yes.
Okay. So this is the one-stop shopping for the liability pilot and CBM program. I hope most of you here are familiar with it. Currently, the prescribed fire liability program is up at the top. And it has links to all kinds of stuff in here. And we're going to come back to this a little bit later. But since you asked about the representation of companies. Right here, you've got those who want themselves known. So this is voluntary, and I sent this out to all the CBMs when we got it launched, and then I now send the link out to anybody who becomes a newly certified CBM, so that if they want to, they can put their information out there. And this is for this actually, in order to see all of it, I think, oh, I have to toggle over here. So this is where you see the business affiliation, but then as you scroll over here, you can also see if they're insured, do they want to be hired? Are they willing to mentor CBM trainees? And then if they want to put their contact information on there. So this is one of the things we did to try to create a way for folks to connect, as well as if they want to be solicited for work for pay, or they have a business that they're trying to promote. Okay. So that's one place where you can see that. I can run those numbers and get back to you on that, and it's good incentive for you to ask me to do that too.
Yeah, and I'm just always thinking about because the insurance side and like how this is helping a lot of people get insured as
Oh
well
yeah.
who are having difficulties. And so,
Mhm.
anyways, I'm just curious more than anything else. But just thinking about messaging, how we message this out, how we encourage more people to participate.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Okay. That's great. Well, on that note, there are conversations that are occurring with insurers who are interested in providing a blanket insurance policy for the state of Oregon for all the CBMs here. And it's combined. It's the interest in the liability pilot as a protective measure and from the liability side, and then the CBM program is a protective measure from the risk management side. And so that's part of this is all kind of growing into that, what you're talking about. And there are folks who are getting insurance in Oregon who could not have gotten it before this program. They would not have been able to. So it's a pretty big deal, actually, that this exists because it's enabling folks to prove that they're managing risk well through their certification so that there's comfort level built. And Conservation United and Forestry Specialties, I think that's what they're called, they're the ones that are interested in doing this. They've done this in several other states where they've worked with another entity like a prescribed burn association to be kind of like a broker for their insurance policy, but only people who are CBMs are eligible. So there are conversations happening about that, and that may be something that rolls out in the near term. So I just gave you kind of a picture of where the CBMs are at. As far as their spread across the state, I would say it's pretty evenly distributed. We don't seem to have, I mean, other than down where Merlin, base is for grayback, you're gonna have a high concentration there because that's where they're at. But other than some of the bias maybe, or not bias, but just larger proportions in certain places because of the company supporting people getting those qualifications. It's otherwise pretty broad. We have folks from industry who are using it because they need it for their insurance. Insurance companies are starting to require this. So that's about what I've got on that piece, unless folks have questions or want to try to kind of get us caught up a little bit here. But yeah, I don't know if folks have any other questions or thoughts on where we're at with our numbers on CBMs. And there's not much to say. It's mostly historical recognition, as I said. And primarily, we've been trying to figure out how to connect those folks with trainees so that there are opportunities for all these folks out there. The 39 people that need 117 burns, which that number is not exact at this point. Some of those folks have gotten burns, but that's how many are needed for that total number. And yeah, what remains is more burns that are available and cleared, and that the comfort level is built with ODF to make them happen, and that's its own job.
I might just add that, I've had a lot of people go through the CBM class, and some of those are contractors or people thinking they're going to serve in this manner that Amanda's saying, but there's also been a significant portion who are landowners that are just really interested in prescribed fire. And they're like, you know what? I was thinking maybe I want to be a burn manager, but now I'm thinking I want to hire a certified burn manager. But now I know more about it and I feel more comfortable in like selecting them. So there's value that we're providing to people through the certified burn manager program, even if they're not actually applying for a field certification book and going the rest of the way.
Yeah, that's a good point, and something I would like to clarify as well, that the onus is not on the training providers to determine whether the students have met the prerequisites for getting issued a field certification book. That's my job. So we have, I'd say, 10 to 20, sometimes 30% of the students don't have the prerequisite experience to open a field certification book. But we've realized that there's so much awareness that's coming out of the class for people like John's referring to. I mean, that's huge. If someone goes through the training and just because of the training, they go, okay, I think I'm ready to hire a CBM now that I understand that process. Great. We're not worried about it. We have not necessarily encouraged the rollout of a lot of training providers all at once because we want to kind of gauge how many people we have out there needing training with that. And if we have too many people that need training, their certification books are going to expire. I mean, when you look at that trainee list, the people in the first category or the first 2 years, they've only got another year or two to finish their certification books. I am willing to entertain extensions. We're not strict on that. We'll be flexible and work with folks. That's more that there is language in the rules about how long it's been since you've taken the training. So I think you have to have it within the 5-year period. So we need to follow those rules, but we're not going to be strict if someone's coming up on their expiration and they just need one more assignment. We'll work with them on that. And that's an example of a rule change that I would actually like to see, which is that you start the certification book on the first assignment, because that's the way the federal field position task book system works. Your task book, I think it expires after a certain amount of time if you have no assignments, but the first assignment is what starts the clock. And so if we switch to that model, that will make it easier for folks to finish, because maybe they get the field certification book and then they start going in burns and they realize they should get some more experience, which I highly encourage. I tell people all the time, if they don't appear to have a lot of experience, that we'd like them to try to gain more before seeking their field certification. Any other thoughts on that before we move over into talking a little bit about how CBM's being used in the cultural fire space?
I have one question, and again, you don't have to answer it if it's outside the scope. Do the certified burn managers, when they volunteer to do it, do they get paid by the landowners?
That depends. Sometimes they do. And it just depends on if that is the arrangement the landowner has with the CBM.
Okay.
I know a CBM who just got paid to oversee a cultural burn down in Coos County.
Okay.
Yeah, good question. I mean, the idea is that those who want to be able to be paid for this work can be. But it's not written into the program. Well, there's the segue right there. Let's see. It's been really interesting to watch how the CBM program has interacted with cultural burning, and that's really specifically with regards to the liability pilot program, which is what defined cultural burning and cultural fire practitioner for the first time in Oregon. And there has been some confusion about that, just I think by the nature of new things coming out, and then some of the clarity around it not being there as far as tribal affiliation versus cultural practices. But regardless, one of the workarounds for that has been to use the CBM program for cultural fire. And so we have actually a couple of people here who on the committee who might want to speak to that, or maybe Tim in particular, since he's managing the fire program with the Klamath. But to kick it off, I just thought I'd kind of give a quick tour of where I see this happening in Oregon. Our first CBMs were from the Grand Ronde tribe, and they immediately started using the program. They actually use it outside ODF protection, um, even though they don't get the liability protection from that, just because it's a system that they can use and they appreciate the structure. So that's what's happening with them. They, again, both in and out. And depending on whether it's trust or fee lands, private lands under tribal ownership, et cetera, the program may or may not apply. So it doesn't necessarily, it actually doesn't apply to trust land. If the tribe is working through the BIA and the trust land is a part of that, then if they're burning on that land, it all goes through the BIA and follows their rules. But if it's on fee land, then they can use the CBM program. So it's a interesting delineation there. And then there's, of course, private lands that are not fee, not trust, and within ODF protection, in which case those are going to follow the rules that we already have in place. They don't have any exceptions to the rules because they're cultural burns. Based on the definition in the statute, a cultural fire practitioner has to be associated with one of the 9 federally recognized tribes in Oregon, and then be conducting a burn for the purposes of cultural purposes. And so the lead must be a cultural fire practitioner. That's a requirement of a cultural burn. And I think that's part of why, in some cases, the term prescribed fire with cultural objectives has been used, so as to not appear as though there's being a use of that statutory definition. So going back to the CBMs, we have the Grand Ronde tribe. We haven't had anyone from Warm Springs, but that's more or less understandable because they have a full on fire program of their own and they do everything through the BIA. The Coquel tribe has expressed interest. They haven't gotten started with it yet, but they're interested in doing the CBM program. We have 4 trainees from the Burns Paiute. And so we're really excited to see them get interested in the program and decide to seek training assignments. And the Umatilla have had a relationship with ODF, and we've worked together on prescribed burns. We've led burns on their behalf, but there has not been a huge appetite there yet, but we may see it in the coming years. Each tribe's got a different approach to how they're gauging their engagement with the program. And I think with that, I'd like to turn it over to Tim to talk a little bit about how the Klamath tribe is engaging, and then maybe Jesse as well.
Sure. So we have maybe a little deviation from the way you described things, Amanda. We have trust land, we have fee land, and we have private land. We have conducted cultural burning on private land following the certified burn manager / cultural burn manager protocols, getting a permit from ODF, and maybe doing more than what was required. I'm not entirely sure. I'm still learning all the rules. However, we do have intention of burning on trust land that is being protected by ODF. So I'm a little unclear. We do have to follow. We have to get a burn plan signed by BIA, or maybe it's Wildland Fire Service now. I think it's Wildland Fire Service now, and yet ODF provides protection. So we'll certainly at least liaise with ODF, if not follow their protocols also. I would assume that we could get credit for doing a burn on ODF protected land, even if it's trust land, if we're adhering to the requirements of the program.
Yeah, that's good. I appreciate that. And I will want to say one caveat. The local operating plans dictate what you can and can't do. So, and in general, what I said is true unless you have an operating plan that dictates otherwise.
Right. So we work with Jake Barnett and Teresa Williams on what we wind up doing here with local ODF. So, and we intend to do a fair amount of cultural burning on former reservation lands that the Forest Service and Department of Interior currently manage. But again, it's going to be on private land that is protected. Most of it's protected by ODF, some of it by some rural fire departments. Trust land that's protected by ODF, but falls under DOI requirements to a certain extent. And then, of course, Forest Service. So there's a variety of them. And when we do that, we're going to be implementing with, we've got 2 or 3 tribal members who are interested in becoming certified cultural burn managers. I don't believe they have finished the process yet. I'm not even sure they've applied yet, but they intend to go through the program to ensure they've got the liability insurance. And they will be doing a fair amount of burning, mostly in meadow type situations in the future. We have some ceremonial burning that may or may not fall within this. We're still evaluating it ourselves to determine whether we think it's a burn that would fall into this program or not. As I read the rules, it could fall into the program to enable us to have the liability insurance. So that's a big reason why we would want to place even some of the ceremonial burning under the framework of the program. I'm not sure if there's any other aspects that I need to cover, but that's essentially where we're at. We've done a couple of burns and we plan on doing many more in the future. We have engines and a crew that we use if necessary to provide contingency resources. And again, anytime we do it, we're going to coordinate with the local jurisdiction that manages fire response, whether it's a rural fire department or ODF or any of the federal agencies.
That's great. I really appreciate that update. And yeah, I think for reference with regards to the trust land, Grand Run is my prime example on that. So, but again, I think things are different down in Douglas County. They're probably different out there in Klamath. So it's whatever your local operating plan dictates for sure. And yeah, Mike, you got a
So
question?
Tim, a question. Do you write your own burn plans?
Yes.
Okay.
I've got a lot of experience writing federal burn plans, decades, and I've written burn plans that fall under the Certified Burn Manager program also. They're a whole lot easier, less time consuming.
So
That
do
was the
you
point.
do you use the ODF Certified Burn Manager template? Is
Yes.
that the okay? Oh, and then I guess since I got you, one last question. So you said you burn on private lands. How does that go working with a private landowner? Is it
The private lands that we've burned on are tribal members' private lands, and they are
okay?
interested in having cultural burning on their land. So that's how we do that. They're they're very cooperative. They ask
But
us.
you haven't burned on like local ranches that own 3 or 4 or 5,000 acres
So
east of
we were
Klamath.
going to do a burn on, I think it's called Rock Creek Ranch, down on the south end of Klamath Lake, and then we didn't get a window. I think it was the year before last, 2024, when fire season went through November, and so that one fell by the wayside. But there may be some private lands that, like that we would consider burning on. However, we've got a large burn program of our own that will probably get in the way of expanding out, at least in the near term.
So if you do a cultural burn on federal lands, are you required to do a different burn plan than on ODF protected lands?
Yes.
Okay.
And the extent of that is, there's a lot of nuance to this. If it's a ceremonial burn, we may not do a full-fledged federal burn plan. But again, we're working through some of that. There's a lot of regulations that apply to standard prescribed burning that may or may not apply to um, some aspects of cultural burning. And while we have some thoughts on that, we still need to work through the details with the particular agencies that are currently managing the land. And again, there's a lot of things that we'd like to do that may or may not be within their policies right now. In the meantime, we're trying to meet all regulations of the agencies that have jurisdiction and ownership. And we may be successful in changing some of the rules for some aspects of cultural burning as we move into the future.
I really appreciate the that briefing on what you guys are doing, and it's helpful to hear because there are differences in different parts of the state in terms of how the tribes are handling this and how they're working with ODF or not. And in some cases, ODF is the protection entity. In Douglas County, it's DFPA. And I don't know, Jesse, if you want to offer any thoughts or even just talk about how you ended up becoming a trainee and there's the fire programs within the tribes, and then there's interest from tribal members to do cultural burning, and those aren't always completely synced up. So I know we want to kind of acknowledge that and try to make space for talking about that as needed. What you got, Jesse?
Wanted to say, Dawoot, big thank you for having me here today to everybody. Also, what a incredible group of brains with regard to fire in here. I want to also say that I'm the education programs officer for the tribe. I don't work in fire. I don't have any career in fire. I don't have any professional training in fire. I have cultural knowledge of fire that was lended down from my grandfather. And so we've been burning up in the woods, we would say, since time immemorial. I've been burning my whole life. Maybe close to a decade ago, 8 years ago now, I relocated back up to my grandfather's property to take care of him until he ended up crossing the river, and I reinitiated some of those practices that we had on our property. He'd gotten older and wasn't able to burn. So I initiated it, and one of them did get away. So it's on our own private property. That property is homesteaded property, so never been bought or sold. U.S. history, original deed signed by Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Columbus Jackson, great grandfather, homesteaded it with my Indian grandmother at the end of the Homestead Act in the late 40s. And a little bit of went off of our land, and I accidentally burned less than 1/16 of an acre on USFS land. I got a couple tickets for that. The first one I was okay with. The one that came 18 months later was a little bit of a surprise, but is what it is. That tells for another day. But that's kind of a little bit of my history with regard to fire, that we have been practicing cultural burning for a long time. We absolutely know the beliefs in it. Or we know why we do it. And I could go on and on about all of the pros and I guess the cons of not having fire, but I think everybody in here kind of knows that. With regard to the tribe, that I am a member of and that I'm also employed with, we have started a fire department recently, a tribal fire department in the last couple of years. We have a tribal fire chief. His name's Monty Bryan. I've worked really closely with Monty. Monty was actually working for us as an emergency manager before we started the fire department. So I had the privilege of getting to know Monty and working with him in an executive capacity for some years before the fire department came to fruition. Monty has admittingly, he was a former chief of fire here in Roseburg, but he's more from the city and with structural fire. So admittingly, the knowledge base he's been trying to grow with regard to wildfire management has been exponential since he started. He's got a pretty good crew now. Amanda talked about DFPA, Douglas Forest Protective Association. A lot of those guys came and worked for Monty. I'm going to be really honest with you. So he's got a pretty good local crew now that does have some experience. but they're still kind of getting their feet wet with regard to all aspects, supporting DFPA, getting to know our tribal lands, meeting community and tribal needs, working in those capacities of our trust land and our fee land, and that's kind of how we operate also. Last fall, I was invited by I don't know his title, but he's directly under Monty. His name's Brandon Pettigrew. He's kind of like our second in charge now, and he was an administrator for DFPA before onboarding with us, so he's got a lot of knowledge. I was invited to do our first cultural burn under Monty with Brandon and Monty on a tribal trust ground, so it wasn't under ODF. And Brandon did write the burn plan for that, and he was really that was the first time we met on that burn, and he was really happy to show me that thick sucker, and and I think he'd like seeing somebody else that knows about that world and showing that he had the capacity to do it, and not just the capacity to do it, but to dot his I's and cross his T's very well. So I guess that's just the 10,000 foot view of who I am, where I'm at. I wonder if I was going to say this or not, but I'm going to put this out there. It is obvious to me that most everyone else in here on this um, board has more knowledge about fire and fire science. I stepped up to be our chairman figure after there was some silence, but I definitely want to put it back out there because there's three of you guys that got your cameras on right now. That I would definitely say, please consider that position over me. But if you don't want to, then I will be the best person I can and I'll move forward. And I know Amanda said, I'm happy. I work well with Amanda. I'll help her plan stuff, and it doesn't sound like there's a lot of caring, but it seems wrong. I mean, I'm not, I like to have aces in places, and I don't want your fearless leader to be using non-preferred nomenclatures and coming to the arena without pinnacle freaking mindset. That's the way I roll, guys. I like smart people, and so I'm happy to do, if nobody else wants to. But I want to throw it back out there and encourage anybody, if you were even remotely close to saying yes, I'm happy with Miss Rao's permission to reconsider the leadership position. But if not, then I will do the best that I can. And I feel good with the people that are in here. But I feel a lot better saying what I just said because it's the truth that's in my heart. And with that, I have spoken. I thank you all.
Thank you, Jesse. I appreciate you very much for being upfront about that. And I do want to be clear that there is no requirement for experience regarding that position, specifically in terms of, you have to have done this or that. I mean, now Colby Drake had experience, but he actually wasn't even really actively burning or doing a whole lot with his certification because he's moved into this other role as the natural resources director. So, he partly stepped down because he was like, I've got this other stuff going on. So to me, it's good for you in some ways to have like kind of an experience with coming on the committee and seeing how things work. But yeah, certainly, I think we're all equals. We just have different things that we bring to the table. And a lot of what you bring is education and culture. And I mean, as a side note, that's right. One of the things that Jesse invited me to participate in that has been really inspiring was watching students from Wolf Creek Job Corps, Glide High School Fire Science Program, Glide Rural Fire Department, all together burning at the Glide Elementary School in an area where cultural plants have been tended in a garden fashion, and there's language like signage with QR codes so you can hear what the names of these plants sound like in native language, just like you've heard Jesse speak here today. And so that to me is this like larger integrative space that I can see CBM moving into. And for what it's worth, ever since that day, I've been thinking to myself, how do we take this and replicate it? And just last week, I went out to Oak Hill School. We looked at the grounds there and I went, here it is. And so we're going to try to put in for some grant funding to do CBM training on those school grounds so that we take this is intergenerational, right? Because that's where you come from, is this intergenerational world of learning. So please consider that a strength for us to get exposed to here. For what it's worth, we didn't choose you to be on this committee because you were the most experienced CBM. It's because you bring other things to the table we need. So, but thank you for speaking your truth, because that still means that there's room if anyone wants to move into that space. Okay, so let's see. I don't know if anyone else on the committee. Oh, Amanda. Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to Jesse because I think what you had to say was fantastic, and I really love what you said. And I will say that the best leaders are those that don't want to lead, and the best leaders are people that are inquisitive and value the people that they are serving. And that seems like it's you, Jesse. So I think you're the right person for the job, and I really appreciate you stepping up.
Well, then I equally am going to say that I am from Douglas County, the timber capital of the world, right? And when I saw your the logo behind you, I didn't realize how big of a part that logo and those stickers were in my childhood. That thing's been around a long time. And my mom used to work for the Fords in the office there at Risberg Lumber. So really, you guys got a lot of pull down here, and we come from places, everybody down here is affiliated with the timber industry in some way, shape, or form. So also appreciate that you're here and giving the people affiliated with AOL a voice.
Kai. Thanks, Amanda.
I'm just going to add on to Amanda's comment. Jesse, I think you're just the right person to be the chair. I pretty much every day have to ask myself if how to like step back from my background in federal fire management and my 10 years working for an organization that largely does federal fire management to figure out how to make fire more approachable and how to make people more connected. And if someone's going to be successful in a space like this, it's someone like you who can help people feel connected with fire. So stoked, support you. And yeah, we're here to support you.
Appreciate you, Kai.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, for those of you who don't know, when we did our CBM training in Roseburg, we did a burn on the last day, and we had to kind of finagle that because we had our exam. We were going to do sand tables. We tabled the sand tables, and we got the exam done, and then we went out and burned, and Jesse blessed that burn in a beautiful way. And it was the only time that I've burned while someone was drumming throughout the burn. Like he didn't just do it and then start burning. People were burning, and then he went up and he started drumming, and it just brought the whole thing alive. It was really cool. So more of that, please. And I really appreciate this discussion. It's really great. I don't know if anyone else wants to. Yeah, that's right. Does anybody else want to speak to the topic at hand and cultural burning and CBM and all that good stuff? I think that's a nice way to pivot. What do we got next? Well, honestly, the next topic, which is rule revision suggestions, is that's something that we need to tend to, but I also I don't know how much we want to dig into that now when we're forming a committee to look at the charter. And it might be as much about asking you all to look at the rules as you look at the charter, because the rules inform the charter. The rules also inform our policy, which then also informs our manual. We don't have a CBM manual yet. And we almost started working on it this year. And then we decided to put the brakes on it because we've been cranking out a lot of policy and manuals at ODF. It's actually been a little bit overwhelming for our staff. And they need to get used to stuff as it comes out and be able to start working with it. And we also realized that we needed to look at the rules and make some changes. And so I think what I would like to do with that part is just ask that folks look at the rules as you look at the charter and make that, part of your June deadline, that if you have rule change recommendations, include that with your charter recommendations. Let's see. Yes, Mike.
You mentioned the handout, the flow chart. Were you going to talk about that in the next half hour at some point?
Yep. I'm about to start on
Because
that.
that, I think, based on what we've gone over the last 2.5 hours, I think that flow chart, when I was studying it, and particularly because I work with a lot of private landowners, big, with 1,000, 2,000 acres, I would like to go through that flow chart if you have time. That sounds like we are anyway. So.
Yeah. Yep, that's on the list. All right, I'm gonna just take a look really quick at what we have left. So I already walked through the directory on the website, so I think we're good on that. I've more or less told you guys about the national forum, and I'm just gonna do these so that we can spend the rest of the time walking through that flow chart because I think it's gonna be there's gonna be comments on that. So as far as the forum goes, again, that was started a year ago. Kyle Lapham and I did it. We just basically put out a call and started connecting with all of these program managers. It's a monthly call. It's very informal. There's no notes taken. There's no attendance taken. We just show up and we fill the hour every single month. There isn't any dead time or dead air. It's just a lot of really robust discussion. You learn about so much. There's different folks that show up every time. But it's just kind of shows the value of networks because a lot of it has led to me thinking about our program and what we might do differently. Another agenda item I wanted to mention was just the liability pilot program. It continues to have no claims coming in, which is what we wanted. And as to whether or not it gets renewed, we don't know. It will sunset in September of 2028 if it doesn't get re-upped. So we'll see what happens with that. One thing to note, which for those of you who are CBMs, maybe spread the word, that a lot of folks are not completing their reporting, and you can't tell if it's because they didn't burn or they burned and nothing happened. And so it'd be great if folks just go back in there and say they actually did their burn because it helps us gauge the use of the program. Registering a burn does not, and actually, if you don't complete it, then you don't have access to the pilot fund anyways. But yeah, just consider that. And yeah, otherwise, I don't have a whole lot on the liability pilot, but Kai has a question or a comment. Yes.
Yeah, it is about the liability pilot. And I recently was reading the bill. It may be January of 28. I could be wrong. I do wonder, Amanda, what the path forward for like extending or reauthorizing that is. I know that ODF or maybe the Business Bureau has to do a review of the last 5 years and make recommendations. Is that correct?
Yeah, we have to report out on the program. So we'll
Okay.
do that, and then there will be some kind of response to that.
And then
And
from there, it just an act of legislation to re-up it. Is
yeah, it
that
could go a couple different directions. Somebody could decide that they want to press for that and make that so, or the legislature could respond and say, okay, we're going to extend it.
Mhm. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Mike.
You said that folks are not reporting on their burns. Does that mean just leading the burn as a CBM or just how about participating in a burn?
No, this is specific to the liability pilot. There's no requirements for anybody notifying or reporting directly to ODF or in any centralized fashion about leading a burn, but it's if you want your burn to be covered by the liability pilot fund, you have to register it. And so people are registering their burns, they complete them, they go, well, nothing happens, and they don't go back in and say, I actually did the burn. And so it's hard I mean, if we don't get claims, that's all that DCBS cares about. That's the Department of Consumer and Business Services. But it still means that we don't really see how much burning is happening through the liability pilot. We only see what people think they're going to burn, but we don't know what they actually did. Amanda.
As it relates to the liability program, I could see some version of AOL or even like the Prescribed Fire Council sort of running with some of that. But I would really be curious about what you talked about around the like group kind of state broad form liability. Like I would be really curious where the insurance companies are at because to me that's the carrot that can really help advance it forward. Um, Knowing a lot of that I think is really would be really helpful for us at least to feel comfortable advocating for something that takes money, by the legislature. So I don't know. I don't know when you'll have more information or how ODF is engaged with that conversation, if we should be reaching out to them as an insurance provider. Um, but that is like a piece that I'd be really interested in before like I went full feet forward advocating and lobbying for the program,
Yeah,
if
I
that makes
mean,
sense.
speaking generally, some insurance companies really care about the liability pilot. Some really care about the CBM program. CBM program is the risk management side that they see as keeping us out of any kind of claim. Others say, as long as you claim to somebody else first, but we might drop you anyways. Like that's what could happen to somebody, which this is some of the companies that I've heard are saying that they like the liability pilot because it prevents claims coming in from them. But if they find out one's gone through and didn't come to them, they're still going to drop that person because they consider them a risk. So not all of them, but yeah. So those are important questions to ask and conversations to have. And yes, I think it would help. I think we could definitely, I think you could ask those questions yourself because you're tied in with some of those folks. And get a sense for how much the liability pilot versus CBM. I mean, I think it's a package deal and that they both together really build it, but it also could be that just the risk management side is enough for some of them. It's hard to say, but the combination has attracted an insurance market here that we didn't have before. And there's at least one company that won't cover unless you can use the liability pilot fund.
Okay, we can connect offline too.
Yeah, let's do that. That
Yeah.
sounds good. Mike.
So speaking of companies, you mentioned Grayback, and I've actually dealt with them quite a bit. They would seem like a great advocate for extending the liability. They might even have their own liability separate from it, but they're such a integral part of the prescribed burning program. Have you contacted them to advocate for the extension of liability, or is that
Well,
even
I can't really do that, but you can, others can. I mean, that's just
Yeah, and they
within
and
my
that's where like they might do that through us as their trade
exactly
association,
right,
right? So
right.
like I'm a registered lobbyist, but they're not registered lobbyists. Like they could come in and do whatever they want as far as like talking to their own legislators and testifying on a bill, but they're not like in Salem every day kind of a thing. But yes, they're a good poster child.
Yeah. My guess is there's a reason they came through the door for their CBMs all of a sudden.
I probably know the reason.
Yeah. Okay. We got 22 minutes left and I want to make sure we work through what's left on the agenda. So I'm gonna the prescribed fire manual from ODF, I think the best thing for me to do is just give you guys that to look at yourselves. I should have done that before the meeting, but I didn't know how much we were really going to get into it. It doesn't go into the CBM stuff a ton. It's way more important that you guys have input or review on or whatever as far as the CBM manual comes, which is down the road. So, but I will send the ODF prescribed fire manual. I think the gist of it is that it gets real specific about how we lead burns versus how we participate in burns. And that's going to be quite different. Like we're going to require more for ourselves to lead burns than we will for participating, just in terms of like NWCG versus CBM. And the primary purpose is in allowing us to work with our federal partners, our partners at TNC and other organizations that follow National Wildfire Coordinating Group, while also allowing us to work with those we've already been working with who haven't been using those programs. So, is the manual available to the public? That's a good question. I don't know if it's posted anywhere, but it is a document we use to guide ourselves. But like I said, I can provide you guys with that. We'll find a way to get that information out. Okay, I'm gonna Boone Zimmerly says it's not posted. We have an expert in the room. All right. Boone is our deputy chief of policy right now.
Yeah, I wasn't going to come off of mute or anything, but just been lurking on here listening to you guys. All good conversations and very informative as we kind of work on all of this stuff. But as it sits right now, know that it's not posted out to the public only because it's I should say only, but largely because it's focused on us as employees, how we conduct ourselves, and not CBM, right? We want to give you guys as much reins as we can, and then also hold ourselves to a high, strict standard to make sure that we're doing everything right to help folks out. Yeah.
But there's no reason we can't share it out. I've already shared it out with folks,
Yeah.
partners and stuff. So, okay,
Yeah.
cool.
I don't know any other reason why we wouldn't share it out.
Okay, great. Thanks, Ben. Okay, now I'm going to get into the, let me see. I want to make sure before I share my screen that this is easy for folks to see. I think
Amanda,
I'm
before we move on, can I chime in really quick on what we
Yeah,
just got done
of
speaking
course.
about?
Yeah.
Anytime we, and I mean we as in this group, are looking at potential legislative actions or inaction that we want to have a voice in. We as the tribe, the Cow Creek tribe, we also have Anna Richter Taylor, a lobbyist in Salem. It's there all the time, but also I work closely with the other tribes, and so I don't, if time ends up always being the deal. So there needs to be, in my experience, like 2 to 3 months ahead of time. But if you can communicate either to myself or to the tribes, then they can work also to try to use the leverage from their sovereignty through our cumulative voices is the 9 tribes when we do government to government quarterly cluster meetings, but also through our lobbyists to try to support the goals that we're trying to achieve.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Jesse. I appreciate that. Okay. I'm gonna share my screen. Okay, now I want to give you guys a quick history on this document before I launch into it. I think it was back in 2021. No, it had to be, no, it was more like 2019. The Oregon Prescribed Fire Council decided to take the task on of creating a navigation tool for planning, permitting, liability, smoke management on non-federal land in Oregon, which it's really private land. Although we realize there's some exceptions that are not considered private. And so this tool was created in a program online called Miro, and then it was, well, I'd say it was a really good first step, but there was actually some inaccuracies in it, and it wasn't complete. So this is version 2.0. And I essentially took that document and then I worked with Shauna Morris, who's our Community Wildfire Defense Grant Coordinator. And it was actually because she found it on the Prescribed Fire Council website and said, this would be great to post to ODF for helping folks with navigating this space on the smoke management page. And I said, oh, hold on, we need to fix it if we're going to do that. So we plugged away at this over the winter. A lot of time was spent on it, and it doesn't mean that it's finished, I guess, is what I would say. If there are comments or corrections or things that would be recommended for changes, we're very open to that. But the way it flows is you start with, okay, you want to conduct prescribed fire on private land. The first thing you do is determine if you're in an ODF district. And then everything in the ODF district flows from that point. And so if you determine you are, which we have this, all of this is hyperlinked. So if you hyperlink that, then it's going to take you to, I better not do that because this is probably going to be super slow. But at any rate, it's going to take you to the map page where you can download and look at your district map. So it basically guides you in how to do that. There's another way to do it, which is the Can I Burn tool that DEQ created. But we actually embedded that over here. And it's not complete. It is mostly complete, but there's definitely some gaps in that map. But the ODF protection maps, the PDF versions are that's about as good a detail as you're going to get. So if you determine you're in an ODF district, then you got 2 things you need to do. One side is smoke management, and everything from this side flows to smoke management until you're at your burn day time. There's obviously things that come together here that need to sync up. Like, okay, your smoke management registration has been completed. You've paid your fee. All the things have happened. You've gotten your burn permit. Okay, those come together and you can conduct your burn. Oh, yes. And then if you're going to do the liability pilot, there's that piece. But you got to get your burn permit done first and blah, blah, blah. So that's the way it flows. Going down through here, we made it, contacting your local ODF office as the first order of business. And there's a reason for that. One is just because the earlier you let ODF know, the better in terms of their ability to help you navigate all of this. And each district does things a little differently, which I know can be somewhat frustrating and cause confusion for some folks who are working in different parts of the state, but they do have that right to make some of those decisions at that level. Amanda.
I just had a question. So usually on a chart like this, it's like a this or that you're choosing between. And on the first flow chart, I think you need to do both, right? So should we add like a and or like step one, step two or something? Because usually it's like a branched decision. It's either this is true or that is true. But in this case, I believe both, right? You have to do smoke management and obtain your burn permit. So
Um, yeah, I think I might be a little bit confused. So it's like this question is, yes, I'm in an ODF. No, I'm not in ODF. And then it goes
yeah.
from there.
And
Um,
then usually it branches out to either two options. Either this is true or that is true. And in this
okay.
case, you have to do both. So to me, it's a
Well,
little
okay, so you're
confusing.
saying it's confusing because it makes you think that you have to choose between smoke management and this part?
Yes.
Okay. Um, I mean, I see what you're saying. I think that's part of why we didn't have like where it's just kind of branched off from this point, like this is either or. But if you want to see that clarified, we haven't heard that comment yet. So let me look into that, see if we can make any changes to that end. I mean, I
Just
think
to clarify that you have to do both. I mean, again, because if you're somebody who's like really new and doesn't and needs this, right? I yeah, because everywhere down the list, the further you go, when there's more than one option on the branched arrow, it's either or. You either fit into this category, that category, or this category.
yeah, I mean, the only point at which that's what it is this point where it's like you go this way or you go that way. And then if there's something we needed to describe that, I don't know how we would, I don't know, I'd have to think about that. Maybe where it's like you take this little blip out and you make it clear you have to do both. I'll see what we can do to make that clearer. Thank you for that.
Okay, that was the only thing that was I mean,
Yeah,
it is a little
see what
bit
you're saying.
confusing. It's a lot of information, but that was the one piece that I thought may confuse
Yeah.
people at the beginning.
There's
Anyway,
certainly a
sorry.
lot of like, yeah, I get what you're saying. There's certainly a lot of decisions to make per box. It's like, do you get to decide about smoke management? No, but here's like determine type of burn. And then there's all these categories and they link to the different places where you see those rules. There's a box just for El Rapa because El Rapa is only applies in Lane County and they have their own rules. And that does not directly correspond to DEQ or open burning or field burning being a type of agricultural burning, not just ag burning and field burning are not the same, for example. So all these links are important because they help you see and understand that. The determined fire response agency, um, and then making it clear that you have to contact the county court or commissioner for lands that are not protected, which a lot of people don't know. And here's where I could see that like this might be kind of confusing for folks as you work your way all the way down here and then you got to go back up here and then work your way down. But we've been back and forth on this. Trying to get this into this format without it being more crazy than this was very challenging. They tried to do the same thing in Washington, and I think they gave up because they created such a massive spaghetti string everywhere that people couldn't navigate it. And so that's why the feedback about like, either or versus doing both is important because if we can improve how that is communicated visually here, that's good. Um, and I guess, so they all kind of come together at the end in a couple different spaces. One being actually conducting burns, the other being if something goes wrong, then what happens, um, and then what kind of protections you have under statute, the claims fund. The biggest improvement to this, aside from more accurate information and color coding, was that we hyperlinked everything. So this was not hyperlinked before. The old version was just had stuff in it, and then you had to go figure it out and look it up yourself. So I think that's probably the highest value to this, is it's like a one-stop shopping for links from everything to the CBM, burn plan templates, PDMs, ferns, local ODF office contact information. Yeah, and so with the less than 10 minutes that we have, I'd like to open it up for discussion beyond what Amanda said, especially since Mike wanted to make sure we walked through this. And if Mike, you want me to do something beyond what I've done here in terms of a tour, please let me know.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong. I didn't raise my hand. Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. You're fine.
I put it in the chat. One question.
Oh.
This flow chart, and when I was studying it before the meeting, assumes that I have to, even if I have 5 small hand piles on my forest land, I have to have a burn plan. That's what the way this chart is laid out. And I have an option of enrolling in a liability, but I don't have to choose that option always, right?
Right. Good point. That's a good point. So what we need to do is reword this to say, if required, create a burn plan.
What do you mean by that? Oh, you mean
Meaning,
the ODF office will determine whether I need to write a burn plan or not?
well, not the ODF office, like the CBM program, for example. So if you're doing a CBM burn, you need to use that. We just wanted to make sure that people knew they could use the CBM templates regardless of whether they're doing a CBM burn.
But if
And
I'm just Joe Q
I
landowner,
know what you're saying. I get what you're
yeah,
saying. We need to make it clear that if required, create burn plan. And so that people don't assume that they have to.
that's the question. Yes.
Yeah, that's
Thank
great.
you.
What was the other question? I'm sorry, I'm not looking at my, let me look at the chat really quick. Okay. Oh, Mark, she had to step it. Okay. Any other comments or questions or thoughts?
Well, one follow up. Do we have to enroll it in the liability pilot?
No.
But if you look at the flow chart, it says enroll burn and liability pilot if eligible. So you have an option there.
Okay, well, we
It
can make
doesn't
it
show.
clear that it's optional. Yeah, okay. If desired or something like that.
Amanda, you might be able to do like a dotted line for that, showing like an optional tract or something too.
Yeah. Okay.
So you just also just like right in front of that, just say option colon and then the rest of your text.
Yeah.
And that would make it.
Yeah, totally. I can wordsmith that, no problem.
Within the smoke clearance, it mentions registering at least 7 days in advance and paying the fee, but it doesn't mention actually getting the smoke clearance the day before. And maybe that's not in all regions.
Good point.
And similarly, the obtained burn permit day before or day of burn, it might be long before that your ODF district would prefer it.
Yeah, you're the second person to mention that one. Yeah, Chris Adlam, he mentioned that.
Yeah, I usually get my burn permit well in advance, but I get my smoke clearance the day before or the day of.
Yeah, okay.
And then I was just wondering, Amanda, so some of it talks about the non-ODF burns and field burns, ODA, Department of Agriculture. I know there's a bunch of counties, at least several counties, where there's some type of like telephone call-in where you do that. Like that's how ODA has.
That's why the phone number's on there.
So that is that where that link takes you?
The link takes you to the definition of field burning so people can see exactly what that means. And then the phone number is there so they can call. Yep.
Okay.
So like I'll just show you it doesn't take you to a clearance page. It takes you to the describing exactly what it is and why we still do it. So, and then the counties where it applies, besides Willamette Valley. And then the links to those
Yeah,
places.
awesome. That's great.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. So that way folks knew that I mean, a lot of this information was not particularly easy to suss out, you know. So a lot of our time was just spent going and finding the right places to send people in these links. And I
This,
think
yeah,
just
this was
playing with
very
the
hard to
link.
suss out. So I
Yeah.
appreciate you doing this. And I can already see places where, like, all of the stuff that I've got in the CBM curriculum is correct, like
Mhm.
for ODF rather. And
Mhm.
then what you've described in here will help me really streamline the questions about, well, what if,
Yeah.
right? The
Yeah.
CBM doesn't really apply there, but you still need to know. So here's the stuff. So this will be
Yep.
great. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. It was, again, I consider it a living document and we can update it. And that's part of why I wanted to get your take on it. Um, oh, thanks, Mike. Yes, this is a challenging program. It's a really fun, challenging program though. And I get to work with a group like this. Um, what else? Anybody else before I start closing us out?
Uh, I'll also or say that you did a great job with this. One thing that might be beneficial is if you could even just separate it into two, it might be
Mm-hmm.
less confusing to people. Like after that first decision point,
Okay.
here's one flow chart versus here's another flow chart. And that
Yeah.
would give you more space to put in a little bit of information in the bubbles and have it be a little less, whoa, overwhelming.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. This is all really good feedback. And even like both Amanda and Jesse to some extent have said, well, we're like not really CBMs. That's actually part of why it's so good to have you here because this isn't just for CBMs. This is for anyone who's like, I just want to do this. What does it take? And if they can't understand it, then it's not very useful. So we want to make it as useful as possible. Any other comments on this? Okay.
Lori mentioned something in the chat.
Oh, okay. Let me see. I'm just, I'm going to stop sharing so I can see okay. When we did our no apps, RX burn the ODS Forester. Yes, you can get an exemption for the 15 days. And that's very common. ODF is very, flexible with that 15 days. That's what the rules say. That's what the rules say, but that doesn't mean that they won't waive that period of time.
If
I've gotten waivers a lot.
I no, I'm not on the board, but but he actually said I didn't need the exemption. It was the 15 days was he said for something else. It was for this was Austin.
I know
So
how you're talking about.
he I was surprised because I'd asked for the exemption and he said we didn't need it. So
Okay,
he said the rules were changing. Just an
great.
FYI.
Okay, well, I'll circle back and make sure that's accurate. It's possible that the definition of an operation and whether that's a prescribed fire or not is somewhat debatable. So
Yeah.
that's why I always just say default to the 15-day notification. That way, if you just do that, then the ODF can be the one to tell you don't need it, and then you're in the clear that way. So, but that's good to know, and I'll follow up on that too. Well, as usual, we filled the time with a lot of great discussion. We made it through a lot of information today. I am extremely grateful to this group for being so engaged and so helpful. It makes my job a lot easier. And I think the formation of some subcommittees is also going to make my job easier. So thanks for prompting that, Amanda. I'm looking forward to working with you all through the summer, and I'm looking forward to our next meeting as well. Does anyone else have any closing thoughts for us as we prepare to adjourn?
I don't know that this has any bearing on what we're doing here, but just in the interest of full disclosure, I'm taking a summer sabbatical and going to be working for ODF. So I'll be an ODF temporary summer and again next summer. But by the time we come back in the fall, I'll be back in my normal or abnormal position as an extension person for OSU. So just full disclosure, just letting you know, I live in both worlds and love it.
Right on, John. We look forward to having you on board and continuing to work with you through OSU. Well, I hope everyone has a lovely afternoon and evening and look forward to our follow-up. Thanks for everything today, everyone, and we'll bid you adieu.